Just one night.
You can have more than one. Why did you photograph my badge?
It wasn't supposed to matter. He knew?
Sir.
Thomas Rodriguez was 42, a facilities operations manager at Altura Medical Systems in Denver. Harper's friends saw him as dependable ordinary and too devoted to ever leave. He wore a faded Navy jacket, drove a dented Ford truck, and repaired his work boots instead of replacing them. What they didn't know was that Thomas had once investigated corporate fraud and had spent 31 days documenting Harper's lies. When she asked for one night with her ex, Thomas placed his wedding ring beside her wine glass. The metal struck the granite with a sharp click. "You can have more than one night," he said. "Before we go back to where this began, tell us what country you're watching from and your local time. And subscribe, because what Thomas had already discovered would turn Harper's one night of freedom into something she never expected. 31 days earlier, Thomas Rodriguez noticed the first change at 6:42 on a Tuesday morning. Harper was standing at the kitchen island in a cream silk blouse, her phone beside the coffee machine. Thomas had just come in from the garage after checking the pressure in her front tires. The weather report predicted snow by noon, and one tire had looked low the night before. Her screen lit up. Cameron Blake. Last night was worth the wait. Harper covered the phone with her hand before Thomas reached the counter. The movement was fast. Too fast to look casual. Thomas set the tire gauge beside the fruit bowl. "Your front passenger tire was 6 pounds low," he said. "I filled it." Harper turned the phone face down. "Thanks." She did not look at him. For 11 years she had left her phone everywhere, on the bathroom sink, between the couch cushions, plugged into his truck when her battery died. Her passcode had once been the month and year of their wedding. 3 days earlier, she had changed it. Thomas knew because she had handed him the phone while driving and asked him to answer a text from a client. When he entered the old code, the screen stayed locked. "Oh," she had said, keeping her eyes on the road. "The office made us update our security settings. Hawthorne and Vale Realty did not manage the passwords on personal phones. Thomas knew that, but he had said nothing. Silence gave people room. Sometimes they used that room to tell the truth. Sometimes they used it to build a larger lie." Harper lifted her travel mug and checked her reflection in the dark kitchen window. "I have a showing in Boulder tonight," she said. "The clients can't meet until 7. What part of Boulder Mapleton Hill?" Thomas nodded. She picked up her leather tote, kissed the air near his cheek, and walked toward the garage. Her perfume remained behind her. It was sharper than the one she usually wore to work. At 7:18 that evening, she texted him. Showing ran late. "Don't wait for dinner." Thomas heated chicken soup Elena had dropped off 2 days earlier. He ate at the kitchen table with the television off. At 9:40, he washed the bowl, wiped the counter, and replaced a loose screw in the cabinet door beneath the sink. Harper came home at 11:26. Her hair smelled faintly of cigarette smoke, though she hated cigarettes. She carried no property brochures, no folder, no tablet. "How did the showing go?" Thomas asked. "Good. They're thinking about making an offer." On which house? She took off one heel, then the other. "The one on Pine Street." Mapleton Hill did not have a Pine Street. Thomas watched her place the shoes beside the stairs. She had answered without pausing. That was what stayed with him. Not the lie itself. The ease of it. The next morning, Thomas found the receipt. He was collecting Harper's dry cleaning from the back seat of her SUV because she had forgotten it. The white paper was folded beneath the passenger seat trapped against the floor mat. The Crawford Hotel, downtown Denver. 2 old-fashioned cocktails. 1 bottle of sparkling water. A ribeye steak. Seared salmon. Chocolate torte. The time printed at the bottom was 9:54 p.m. The same hour Harper had supposedly been discussing inspection deadlines with buyers in Boulder. Thomas stood beside the open car door, while cold air moved through the garage. He read the receipt twice. Then he photographed it, returned it to the exact place where he had found it, and hung the dry cleaning inside the laundry room. He did not ask her about dinner. He did not ask who had ordered the ribeye. He went to work. Altura Medical Systems occupied a 12-story glass building near the Denver Tech Center. Thomas arrived before most of the executives. By 7:10, he had reviewed overnight maintenance alerts, approved a ventilation repair, and denied a contractor's request to enter a restricted laboratory without proper identification. People called him when lights failed, doors jammed, or conference rooms became too cold. Most of them assumed that was the whole job. Thomas never corrected them. At noon, he opened the shared mobile account from his office computer. Harper's number had exchanged 47 texts with the same number during the previous billing cycle. The number belonged to Cameron Blake. Thomas recognized the name from a photograph Harper kept in an old collegiate album. Cameron had been standing beside her at a University of Colorado fundraising gala, one arm around her waist, both of them young and bright beneath paper lanterns. Years earlier, Harper had described him as reckless. He always needed to be the most important man in the room, she had said. She had also remembered the exact kind of car he drove. Thomas closed the account. That Friday, Harper asked him to attend a networking dinner hosted by Hawthorne and Vale at the Halcyon Hotel in Cherry Creek. "You should wear the charcoal suit," she said as Thomas buttoned a pale blue shirt. "The navy one fits better. The charcoal one looks more ambitious." Thomas met her eyes in the bedroom mirror. Ambitious for what? She adjusted an earring. Never mind. At the hotel, Harper moved through the room as though she had been designed for it. She laughed at the right volume, touched people lightly on the arm, remembered spouses, neighborhoods closing dates, and private schools. Thomas stayed close enough to be polite. When she introduced him to a senior broker named Madison Pierce, Harper smiled and said Thomas keeps buildings from falling apart. Madison laughed. Thomas did too. Harper did not mention that he managed emergency systems for a medical technology company valued at more than $2 billion. She did not mention that Altura trusted him with vendor access infrastructure failures and restricted floor coordination. Perhaps she had forgotten. Perhaps she no longer cared. Near the ballroom entrance, a black display board listed the evening's sponsors. At the top, beneath a Silver Mountain logo, were 3 words: Blake Summit Capital. Thomas heard Harper laugh behind him. He turned. Cameron Blake stood beside her. He was taller than Thomas remembered from the photograph. His dark suit fit perfectly. A steel watch rested against his wrist. He held a glass of bourbon without drinking from it. His hand was touching Harper's elbow, not gripping it. Not accidental either. Harper saw Thomas looking and moved half a step away. "Thomas," she said, "this is Cameron. We knew each other in college." Cameron extended his hand. "I've heard almost nothing about you." The words arrived with a smile. Thomas shook his hand. "That makes 2 of us." Cameron's smile stayed in place, but his fingers tightened once before releasing. Harper changed the subject. She called Cameron Cam twice during the next 4 minutes. Thomas had never heard her use that name before. When Thomas asked how Blake Summit had become involved with the event, Cameron said his firm was expanding into healthcare investments. "Medical technology is where the real movement is," he said. "You probably see that from the maintenance side." Thomas glanced at Harper. She was watching Cameron, not him. "I see enough," Thomas said. On Monday night, Thomas worked late after a pressure alarm shut down part of Altura's cooling system. He left the building at 11:48. Instead of taking Interstate 25 home, he drove downtown. He told himself he wanted to see the address listed on Blake Summit Capital's registration. Nothing more. The office occupied the 6th floor of a renovated brick building on Wincoop Street. Thomas slowed as he approached. Harper's white Lexus SUV was parked beneath a street lamp across from the entrance. He recognized the scratch above the rear wheel. He had polished around it the previous Saturday. The dashboard clock read 12:17 a.m. Thomas pulled into an empty loading space half a block away and shut off the engine. The office windows on the 6th floor were still lit. His hands remained on the steering wheel. At 12:31, two shadows crossed behind the glass. One was taller. The other moved with the familiar outline of Harper's shoulders. Thomas did not get out of the truck. He did not call her. He sat in the dark as snow began to collect across the windshield, watching the two shadows disappear deeper into Cameron Blake's office. By sunrise, the snow had buried the lower half of Thomas's windshield. He had remained in the loading space for 43 minutes. Harper's SUV had not moved. At 1:00 a.m., Thomas started the truck and drove home. He did not wait to see her leave. He had already seen enough to know that the explanation she would offer could not be trusted. What he did not yet know was why Cameron Blake had returned after so many years, or why Harper had begun asking questions about Altura Medical Systems. An affair would have been painful. The questions made it dangerous. Harper came home at 2:18 a.m. Thomas heard the garage door rise from the bedroom. He was lying on his back with the lights off, still wearing the t-shirt he had worn beneath his work clothes. Her footsteps crossed the kitchen. A cabinet opened, water ran. Then she entered the bedroom without turning on the light. "You're awake?" she asked. "Yes. The Boulder clients kept me forever." Thomas looked toward her outline near the closet. At Cameron's office, the room went still. Only for a second. Then Harper laughed softly. "I stopped there after the showing. He's helping sponsor a client event. At midnight, we were reviewing a proposal." Thomas let the silence settle between them. Harper removed her earrings and placed them on the dresser. "You're making it sound strange. I asked where you were, and I told you." She carried her clothes into the bathroom and closed the door. Thomas watched the thin line of light appear beneath it. There was no point pressing her. A confrontation would only teach her what he knew. She would delete messages, move money, change stories, warn Cameron. Thomas had spent years interviewing employees who believed they could talk their way around records. The careless ones confessed quickly. The experienced ones adjusted their lies to match the questions. Harper had always been good with people. Thomas would not give her the questions. The next afternoon, during his lunch break, he opened the Colorado Secretary of State's business database. Blake Summit Capital had been formed 6 years earlier. Its registered office was the building on Wincoop Street. Cameron Blake was listed as founder and managing partner. 3 related companies shared the same mailing address: Blake Summit Healthcare Fund, Summit Ridge Advisory, and an entity called Front Range Strategic Holdings. Thomas wrote the names in a black notebook. He used public sources only. No passwords, no private accounts, no shortcuts. The habit came back easily. Search, verify, record. He found 2 civil lawsuits in Denver District Court. The first had been filed by a former investor named Peter Holloway, who claimed Blake Summit had misrepresented the value of a commercial property fund. The second came from a marketing agency seeking $184,000 in unpaid fees. Neither case had been resolved. Property records showed Cameron did not own the downtown condominium featured in several business photographs. The unit belonged to a limited liability company based in Nevada. The black Range Rover Harper had once mentioned, after the networking dinner was registered to a luxury leasing service. The steel watch on Cameron's wrist might have been real. Almost everything around it appeared borrowed. Thomas felt no satisfaction. Debt did not make Cameron harmless. Desperate men often took larger risks than comfortable ones. On Blake Summit's website, Cameron stood in front of a wall of windows overlooking downtown Denver. Beneath his photograph was a sentence about disciplined growth in emerging markets. A second page described a new healthcare investment fund. Blake Summit Healthcare Opportunities Fund 2. Target capital $150 million. Focus surgical technology, medical robotics, and healthcare data systems. Thomas read the page twice. Altura Medical Systems had spent the previous 8 months preparing for a confidential acquisition. Most employees did not know the target company's name. Thomas knew only because his department had been asked to prepare restricted office space for visiting executives and outside attorneys. The target developed surgical robotics. He closed the website. That evening, Harper entered the kitchen while Thomas was repairing the handle on a saucepan. She poured herself sparkling water and leaned against the counter. "Do executives ever come through your building without being listed anywhere?" she asked. Thomas tightened the screw once. "Sometimes." "How does that work?" "They enter." Harper smiled. "You know what I mean." Thomas tested the handle. "It depends who they are." She took a drink. "Do they use the main lobby sometimes?" "What about the north entrance?" Thomas placed the screwdriver beside the stove. "Why are you asking?" Harper shrugged. "One of my clients mentioned Altura might be expanding. I was curious. What client? You don't know her?" Thomas looked at her. She held his gaze for 2 seconds, then checked her phone. The next question came 4 days later. They were driving to a grocery store in Cherry Creek when Harper pointed toward a delivery truck. "Can vendors get into Altura after hours approved vendors can? With regular badges, depends on the work." She turned toward the passenger window. "You make everything sound classified." "Some things are." Her reflection in the glass stopped smiling. Thomas began recording the questions in his notebook. February 6th, 7:42. p.m., north entrance. February 10th, 3:16 p.m., vendor access after hours. February 12th, 8:05 a.m., temporary record storage. February 14th, 9:30 p.m., executive visitor schedules. He wrote her exact words when he could remember them. The questions arrived casually, never in groups. Harper placed them between ordinary conversations about groceries traffic and real estate commissions. She thought the space between them made them invisible. It did not. On February 15th, Thomas returned from the shower and found his Altura identification badge on the bedroom dresser. He normally clipped it to the belt loop of the pants he planned to wear. That morning, the badge rested 6 inches to the left beside Harper's bottle of hand lotion. He picked it up. There was a faint smear across the clear plastic cover. Harper stood near the closet fastening a bracelet. "Did you move this?" She glanced over. "No, it was on my pants." "Maybe it fell." "It fell onto the dresser?" Harper sighed. "Thomas, I didn't touch your badge." He clipped it to his belt. "I didn't say you did. You asked me, and you answered." Her mouth tightened. Thomas left for work. At Altura, he examined the badge beneath the bright light over his desk. The card contained his photograph employee number department code and a colored security stripe. The reverse side showed emergency instructions and a barcode used by certain internal readers. A photograph of both sides would not be enough to duplicate the encrypted chip, but it would be enough to produce a convincing visual copy. For someone wearing a delivery uniform, convincing might be all that was needed to pass a distracted guard. Thomas called no one yet. Suspicion was not evidence. That night, he opened the shared family cloud account to download photographs from Elena's birthday dinner. Thomas and Harper both used the account for household documents, vacation photos, and automatic backups. The recently deleted folder contained 23 items. Most were duplicates. One showed a luxury kitchen Harper had listed the previous month. Another showed Cameron standing near a private airplane with 3 men in dark coats. The final 2 images made Thomas stop. The front of his Altura badge. The back of his Altura badge. Both photographs were sharp. Both had been taken on the marble counter in their upstairs bathroom. The file information showed they had been created at 6:54 that morning, while Thomas had been in the shower. He restored the files to the shared folder, downloaded copies, and recorded the creation time. Then he checked the device information. Harper's phone. Thomas sat motionless at the desk. The house was quiet around him. The furnace started in the basement. A car passed outside, tires hissing against wet pavement. He looked at the image of his own face beneath the Altura logo. The betrayal had changed shape. It was no longer confined to hotel receipts and midnight visits. Harper had photographed something connected to his work, deleted the evidence, and then lied when he asked whether she had touched it. He created a folder on an encrypted external drive. He named it Household Records. Inside, he placed the receipt phone account, screenshots, public business filings, his dated notes, and the badge photographs. At dinner the following evening, Harper pushed roasted vegetables around her plate while answering messages beneath the table. Thomas cut a piece of chicken. "When did Cameron contact you again?" Her fork stopped. "What, you said you hadn't seen him since college. When did that change?" Harper placed the phone beside her plate. "A few weeks ago. At the Hawthorne event? Before that. Maybe 3 weeks." Thomas nodded slowly. The shared mobile records showed Cameron's number appearing 4 months earlier. The first call had lasted 38 minutes. The second had lasted more than an hour. Harper reached for her wine. "Why are you suddenly interested I met him? That doesn't mean you need to investigate him." Thomas watched the wine settle in her glass. "I asked one question. You have a way of making questions sound like accusations." He returned to his dinner. Harper picked up her phone again. The screen reflected in the dark window behind her. A message appeared. "Cameron. Did you get everything?" Harper turned the phone over. Thomas said nothing. Later, after she went upstairs, he reopened the badge photograph on his computer. He enlarged it until the colored stripe filled the screen. The entire security marking was visible. So was the small vendor authorization symbol printed beside it. Thomas stared at that symbol for several seconds. Then he reached for his phone and searched for the direct number of Altura's chief compliance officer. Thomas did not call Altura's compliance office that night. He wrote the number in his notebook, closed the computer, and listened to Harper move through the bedroom upstairs. Reporting the badge mattered. So did understanding how far the damage had already spread. At 5:35 the next morning, Thomas carried his stainless steel thermos into the basement office. Harper was still asleep. The house was dark, except for the desk lamp and the blue glow from his monitor. He opened the folder marked Household Records. Then he began the inventory. Thomas had managed the household finances for most of the marriage, not because Harper lacked ability. She simply disliked repetitive work. Bills bored her. Insurance renewals irritated her. Tax documents disappeared beneath real estate brochures until Thomas organized them. He opened their joint checking account first. The balance looked normal. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, nothing obvious. That was how hidden damage usually worked. It did not announce itself in the account everyone watched. Thomas downloaded 12 months of statements and arranged them by date. He searched for transfers, cash withdrawals, and payments to unfamiliar companies. 3 charges appeared under the name Aspen Grove Interiors: $4,800, $7,250, $12,950. Total $25,000. Thomas stared at the company name. Harper had mentioned renovating the kitchen 2 months earlier. She wanted white oak cabinets, a larger island, and imported stone countertops. Thomas had asked her to collect estimates before they borrowed money. She had never shown him one. He opened the home equity line. The $25,000 had not come from checking. It had been drawn against the house. The transaction description read, "Kitchen Renovation Deposit." Thomas searched their shared email account. No contract, no estimate, no design plan, no permit application. He searched Colorado business records for Aspen Grove Interiors. No company existed under that exact name. His coffee cooled beside him. Thomas moved to their credit reports. His own showed nothing unexpected. Harper's report contained 2 revolving accounts he had never seen. One had been opened 14 months earlier. The other 7 months earlier. Both used their home address, but electronic statements had been sent to a private email account. Thomas calculated the balances. $31,760 on a premium travel card, $36,640 on a retail and dining account, together $68,400. He leaned back in the chair. The number was not abstract. It represented more than a year of mortgage payments. It represented the emergency fund they had built after his father died. It represented the cabin roof that needed replacing before another Colorado winter. Thomas opened the available transaction summaries. A boutique hotel in Aspen, a jewelry store in Cherry Creek, 2 payments to a luxury travel company, restaurants Thomas had never visited, a designer store where Harper once told him she had used a client gift card. Then he found 4 payments connected to Blake Summit Capital. The descriptions were vague: consulting deposit, investment administration fee, private fund reservation. The total was $18,500. Thomas wrote every amount in his notebook. His handwriting remained straight. His breathing did not. At 6:22, footsteps sounded above him. Thomas closed the browser and placed the notebook inside a locked drawer. Harper entered the kitchen 5 minutes later wearing a gray robe. She found him making eggs. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." She opened the refrigerator. "Work something like that?" Harper removed a bottle of cold brew coffee. "I might be gone this weekend. We're a client retreat in Vail." Thomas turned 1 egg in the pan. "Which client?" She closed the refrigerator harder than necessary. "You've been asking that a lot. I asked twice. It feels like more." Thomas placed the eggs on a plate. Harper watched him for a moment. "You know, not every part of my work needs to be audited." "No," he said. "It doesn't." The answer seemed to unsettle her more than an argument would have. She took her coffee upstairs. At 8:15, Thomas called Bennett, Sloan, and Pierce. The receptionist offered him an appointment the following week. Thomas gave her his name and said the matter involved possible financial dissipation, undisclosed debt, and a workplace security concern. He was transferred to Rachel Bennett. She listened for less than 3 minutes. "Can you be here at 2?" she asked. The law office occupied the 4th floor of a sandstone building near Cherry Creek North. There were no dramatic paintings or oversized windows. The waiting room held 4 gray chairs, a water dispenser, and a shelf of Colorado legal guides. Rachel Bennett entered at exactly 2. She was 46, with short brown hair, and a navy suit without visible jewelry except a plain silver watch. Her handshake was firm. "Mr. Rodriguez, Thomas is fine. Then call me Rachel." Her office contained 2 monitors, 3 organized stacks of folders, and no family photographs. Thomas placed a flash drive and his notebook on the desk. Rachel did not touch either one. "Start with what you know," she said, "not what you suspect." Thomas respected the distinction. He described the hotel receipt, the mobile account, Harper's midnight visit to Cameron's office, the hidden credit cards, the home equity withdrawal, the badge photographs. He did not describe Harper as selfish, cruel, or dishonest. He gave dates, amounts, locations, exact phrases. Rachel took notes without interrupting. When he finished, she set down her pen. "First, do not empty the joint accounts. I wasn't planning to. Do not cancel her cards. Do not destroy property. Do not threaten to expose the affair. Do not access accounts that are solely hers unless you have lawful authorization." Thomas nodded. "Everything I reviewed was available through shared records or credit reports connected to the household." "Good. Keep it that way." Rachel turned 1 page in her legal pad. "Colorado follows equitable distribution. That does not always mean equal. Hidden debt and dissipation of marital assets matter, but we need records, not conclusions. I have records. You have the beginning of records." The sentence was not dismissive. It was precise. Rachel asked whether Thomas wanted a divorce. He looked toward the window. Outside, shoppers crossed the street carrying paper bags. A delivery driver pushed a handcart toward a restaurant. Life moved without pausing for the question. I don't know what marriage is left, he said. That isn't the same answer. Thomas rubbed his thumb against the edge of his wedding ring. No, I don't think I can stay married to someone who used my work badge. Rachel studied him. The affair hurts, yes, but the badge frightens you. Yes. Then treat those as separate issues. One belongs in this office. The other belongs with your employer. Thomas looked at the flash drive. If I report it, there could be an investigation. There should be. She could lose her job. If she did something wrong, that consequence would come from the conduct, not from your report. Rachel moved the flash drive back toward him. I don't want copies of potential company security material until we determine what is appropriate. Preserve everything exactly as it is. She gave Thomas a written list. Mortgage documents, tax returns, retirement statements, credit reports, insurance policies, bank records, property titles, business interests. He was to make copies, record dates, and leave originals untouched. Open a separate account for future income, Rachel said. Not to hide money, to establish control over what comes in from this point forward. Continue paying legitimate household obligations. What about the joint savings? Do not move it without advice. Thomas folded the list. Rachel leaned back. Does Harper know you found the debt? No. Does she know you restored the badge photographs? No. Does Cameron know you are reviewing his public records? No. Keep it that way. Thomas looked at her. You're telling me to act normal. I'm telling you not to warn people who may be moving money or destroying evidence. The office became quiet. Rachel tapped the line in her notes showing the $25,000 withdrawal. This payment concerns me. It was labeled as a renovation deposit. But there was no renovation, no. Find the full transfer record. We need the receiving institution and final beneficiary. Thomas left the office at 3:18. He opened a checking account at Front Range Community Bank before closing time. His next paycheck would be deposited there. He transferred nothing from the joint accounts. That evening, Harper sat on the couch watching a real estate program while Thomas worked at the dining table. She glanced toward his computer. Taxes already organizing records. You love paperwork more than anyone I know. Thomas looked down at the transaction history. The expanded bank record had loaded. Aspen Grove Interiors had not received the home equity money. The description had been entered manually. The actual beneficiary was a business account at Centennial Commercial Bank. Thomas clicked the beneficiary details. Blake Summit Capital Management, LLC. He read the name once, then again. Harper laughed at something on television. Thomas downloaded the record, saved it to the encrypted drive, and wrote the transfer date beneath Cameron Blake's name. The money had been sent 6 weeks before Harper claimed they had reconnected. Thomas reported the compromised badge at 7:12 the next morning. He did not send an email. Emails could be forwarded, misunderstood, or read without context. Instead, he called Marcus Reed directly and asked for 10 minutes in person. Marcus gave him 5. Compliance conference room, he said. 8 o'clock. The conference room stood behind 2 locked doors on Altura's 9th floor. It had no windows, no decorative art, and no speakerphone sitting openly on the table. A security monitor in the corner displayed the company logo against a dark blue screen. Marcus Reed entered carrying a black folder. He was 51, broad-shouldered, and careful with silence. Before joining Altura, he had spent 12 years investigating federal procurement fraud. Thomas had worked with him on 3 internal incidents. Neither man wasted words. Marcus closed the door. What happened? Thomas placed 2 printed photographs on the table. The front of his badge, the back. My wife took these without my permission. Marcus did not touch them immediately. How do you know she took them? The file data identifies her phone. They were created in our bathroom while I was in the shower. She deleted them from a shared cloud account. You restored them lawfully. Yes. Shared account. Shared access. Marcus examined the photographs. Who else has seen these? I don't know. Do you suspect she sent them to someone? Yes? Who Cameron Blake, Blake Summit Capital. Marcus's eyes lifted. Why him? Thomas explained the public records, the healthcare fund Harper's questions about Altura, and the $25,000 transfer. He did not mention the hotel night until Marcus asked whether Harper and Cameron had a personal connection. They dated in college, Thomas said. They have reconnected. Marcus waited. Thomas added, She has lied about how often they meet. The fluorescent light hummed above them. Marcus looked at the badge again. You understand I can't treat this as a marital dispute. I'm not asking you to. If we open an inquiry, you won't control where it goes. I understand? Your wife could be interviewed. Yes. Outside counsel may become involved. Yes. Marcus closed the folder without placing the photographs inside. I need the original files preserved. I also need a written incident statement limited to workplace facts. Leave out opinions about the marriage. Thomas nodded. Marcus slid a temporary badge across the table. It had a yellow stripe instead of blue. Your current credential is being disabled now. What will monitoring show any attempted use? Physical readers' internal checkpoints, visitor verification requests. Can the badge be cloned from photographs? Not electronically. But visually, Marcus looked at him. Enough to fool a person who isn't paying attention. That was Thomas's concern. Altura's encrypted badge system was difficult to duplicate. Human attention was easier to copy around. At 8:26, Thomas surrendered his old credential. By 9:00, the security team had placed a silent alert on its badge number. Thomas returned to his office and continued working. A ventilation contractor needed access to the 11th floor mechanical room. A laboratory freezer had reported unstable temperature readings. 2 executives requested reserved parking for visitors whose names were not yet listed in the public calendar. Thomas handled each matter without rushing. His title sounded simple: Facilities Operations Manager. Harper heard the word facilities and imagined light bulbs, clogged drains, and broken door handles. Those tasks existed. They were not the job. Thomas coordinated every outside vendor entering Altura after hours. He reviewed emergency infrastructure plans. He managed access during power failures, hazardous material alarms, and executive security events. When construction crews opened walls near restricted networks, his approval was required. 6 years earlier, he had helped redesign Altura's physical access procedures after an employee carried prototype equipment out through a loading dock. Before Altura, Thomas had worked for Westbridge Health Network as a corporate risk analyst. His first major case involved a hospital purchasing director who approved inflated equipment contracts in exchange for private payments. The director smiled through 3 interviews and denied everything. Thomas found the truth in loading records. 43 medical monitors had been purchased. Only 28 had arrived. The missing serial numbers led to a warehouse in Aurora and a billing company registered to the director's brother-in-law. Thomas spent 9 years doing work like that. He traced false invoices, interviewed employees, preserved electronic records, and testified in 2 civil trials. The job paid well. It also followed him home. Then his father, Luis Rodriguez, suffered a stroke in Albuquerque. Thomas arrived at the hospital 6 hours too late. Luis never woke. After the funeral, Thomas resigned from Westbridge. He wanted work with fixed walls, visible systems, and fewer nights spent studying the ways trusted people stole from one another. Harper had supported the decision at first. Later, she began describing it as giving up. At 2:40 that afternoon, Marcus appeared in Thomas's doorway. "Walk with me?" They took the service corridor toward the freight elevators. Marcus waited until no one else was near them. Your old badge triggered an alert. Thomas kept walking. When 2:43 this morning, where restricted records floor, east service entrance. Thomas stopped beside a fire extinguisher cabinet. Was entry granted? No. The electronic credential failed because we had already replaced it. Camera, we have footage. Marcus led him to a security office on the 3rd floor. A technician played the recording. The image showed a man entering through the underground delivery area. He wore a gray delivery uniform, a dark baseball cap, and work gloves. He pushed a rolling equipment case with both hands. At the first checkpoint, he held something toward the camera. The image blurred when Marcus enlarged it. A badge. Thomas's photograph appeared on the front. The guard behind the desk leaned closer. Before he could inspect it, another employee entered through the adjacent lane. The man in the delivery uniform moved with him, using the distraction to pass the visual checkpoint. He tailgated through the first door, Marcus said. At the restricted floor elevator, the cloned badge failed. The man tried it twice. Then he looked toward the camera. The brim of his cap concealed most of his face. He returned to the garage and left through the vehicle exit 4 minutes later. Marcus changed the camera angle. A black Chevrolet Tahoe drove away. The rear license plate was visible for less than a second. Security had enhanced the frame. The vehicle was registered to Front Range Strategic Holdings. Thomas recognized the name, one of Cameron's related companies. Marcus paused the footage. You said Blake Summit Capital, yes. This vehicle is connected to one of its shell entities. Thomas watched the frozen image. A copied badge, a delivery uniform, a rolling case large enough to carry documents or equipment. This was not curiosity. It was an operation. Marcus turned away from the monitor. From this point forward, you do not investigate Cameron Blake. I understand. You do not confront your wife about the badge. Thomas said nothing. I mean it, Thomas. I heard you. Corporate legal is being notified. We will preserve footage, access logs, and guard statements. Depending on what we find, outside authorities may be contacted. Thomas looked at the screen again. The man's gloved hand rested on the rolling case. What was stored on that floor last night? Marcus's expression hardened slightly. You don't need that answer. Thomas met his eyes. Yes, I do. No, you want it. That's different. The correction landed cleanly. Thomas nodded once. Marcus lowered his voice. Your job now is to remain credible. Do your work. Preserve what you lawfully have. Say nothing that gives anyone a reason to destroy evidence. Thomas left the security office at 3:17. He spent the remainder of the day inspecting a damaged pressure valve in Altura's backup cooling system. The work required both hands. That helped. At home, Harper was in the kitchen opening a bottle of wine. Her phone lay beside the sink. Thomas removed his jacket and placed his keys in the ceramic bowl near the door. Harper looked toward his waist. Her eyes settled on the yellow stripe of his new badge. That's different, she said. Thomas opened the refrigerator. What is your badge? He took out a container of leftover rice. The stripe used to be blue. Did it? Harper leaned against the counter. Why did they replace it? Thomas closed the refrigerator and looked at her. For 1 second, neither of them moved. Routine replacement, he said. Harper's gaze dropped to the badge again. Then she lifted her wine glass. Your company takes itself very seriously. Thomas placed the rice on the counter. It has reasons. Harper turned toward the window and changed the subject. But before she did, Thomas saw her thumb move across her phone screen. A message was sent. Harper waited 6 days before asking for permission. By then, Thomas had already met Rachel Bennett, twice reported the badge breach to Marcus Reed, and collected copies of every financial record he could lawfully access. He had also learned how much effort it took to behave normally inside a marriage that no longer felt real. He still made coffee at 6:10. He still took the trash bins to the curb on Thursday nights. He still replaced the furnace filter Harper had forgotten to order. Each ordinary task felt like placing another clean sheet over something dead. On Saturday evening, Harper sent him a message from upstairs. Can we talk tonight? Thomas read it while standing in the garage beside his truck. He had spent the afternoon replacing a cracked belt in the garage door motor. His hand smelled of rubber and machine oil. A thin black mark crossed the side of his thumb. He replied with one word. Sure. At 8:20, Harper came downstairs wearing soft gray pants and a white sweater. Her hair was tied loosely behind her neck. She had opened a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc and placed 2 glasses on the kitchen island. Only one contained wine. Thomas washed his hands, dried them carefully, and sat across from her. Near the staircase stood a small red overnight bag. The price tag had been removed, but one strip of clear plastic still clung to the handle. Harper followed his eyes. That's for a work trip. Thomas rested both hands flat against the granite. When next week? Where she lifted her glass but did not drink. I'm not sure yet. Thomas looked at the bag again. Harper pulled out the stool opposite him. I need you to listen before you react. I'm listening. She breathed in slowly, as though she were preparing to deliver difficult news to a client. I've been thinking about us. Thomas said nothing. About where we are. Where I am. She touched the stem of the wine glass. I don't think I've been honest with myself for a long time. The words sounded prepared. Not memorized exactly, but rehearsed enough to arrive in the right order. Thomas watched her left hand. Her wedding ring remained on. I reconnected with Cameron, she said, when a few weeks ago. The lie had already been disproved by 4 months of phone records and a transfer made 6 weeks before that. Thomas allowed it to remain in the room. Harper continued. We've talked about college, about who we were then. There are things I never really resolved. What things? She looked toward the dark window. Feelings. Thomas kept his breathing even. It was easier when he treated the conversation like an interview. Do not fill silence. Do not rescue the speaker. Let the next sentence come. Harper finally looked back at him. I need 1 night with him. The refrigerator motor started behind Thomas. Somewhere inside the wall, the plumbing clicked. Nothing else moved. Harper leaned forward. I know how that sounds. How does it sound like I'm trying to hurt you? Are you no? The answer came quickly. I'm trying not to lie to you. That should count for something. Thomas's fingers pressed lightly against the cold granite. The hotel receipt sat inside an encrypted folder. The midnight office visit had been written in his notebook. The photographs of his badge had already become evidence in a corporate investigation. The $25,000 was still missing. Harper was offering honesty after spending months removing every part of the truth that might cost her something. What would happen during this night? Thomas asked. Her shoulders stiffened. I don't think details would help. You're asking me to agree without knowing what I'm agreeing to. I'm asking you to trust me. Thomas looked at her wedding ring. Harper noticed. It's not about replacing you, she said. It's about closure. Closure usually means ending contact. That's what I'm trying to do. With a hotel room. Her mouth tightened. I didn't say anything about a hotel. You brought an overnight bag downstairs. Harper glanced toward the stairs. For the first time, her control slipped, only slightly. I packed early because I knew this conversation would be difficult. For a trip you said wasn't planned. I said I wasn't sure where. Thomas watched the wine move when she set down the glass. Have you chosen the date? Harper hesitated. That was the answer. When he asked, tomorrow. What time, Thomas? What time? She exhaled through her nose. 6. And the hotel? Her eyes narrowed. The Crawford. The same hotel printed on the receipt from 31 days earlier. Thomas felt something inside him settle, not break. Breaking had happened in smaller pieces over the previous month. This was the sound after the breaking stopped. Harper studied his face. Say something. You already booked it. I wanted to know whether you could handle the truth. No. You wanted to know whether I would approve a decision you had already made. That's not fair. Is the room paid for? She reached for the wine again. Yes. With which card? Mine. Thomas knew the joint account would show the answer soon enough. Harper pushed back from the island. I came to you instead of sneaking around. Thomas looked at her. She lowered her eyes first. I mean, I came to you before anything happened. He said nothing. Her voice sharpened. Can you not sit there like some kind of judge? What would you prefer, emotion? Anything. Anger would at least be real. Thomas almost laughed, but there was nothing humorous in it. She had mistaken noise for truth for years. A raised voice would have comforted her. Anger could be called jealousy. Jealousy could be called control. Control could be used to make her the injured person. Thomas gave her none of it. I don't own you, he said. Harper blinked. You can make your own choices. Her posture changed. Some tension left her shoulders. Thomas saw relief move across her face before she hid it. So you understand. I understand that you've decided to spend the night with Cameron. I need this. That isn't the same as needing my permission. Harper's hand closed around the wine glass. I don't want us to destroy 11 years over one night. One night isn't what destroyed it. Her eyes sharpened. What does that mean? Thomas did not answer. He would not mention the badge. He would not mention the failed access attempt. He would not mention Rachel or the bank records. Marcus had told him to remain credible. Rachel had told him not to warn anyone who might destroy evidence. Thomas would follow both instructions. Harper stood. You're being cold. No. Yes, you are. I'm trying to be honest, and you're acting like this is a business transaction. Adults make choices. Choices create consequences. That isn't business, it's life. I asked for one night without consequences. Thomas looked at her for a long moment. There is no such thing. Harper folded her arms. Then what are you saying? Thomas lowered his eyes to the wedding ring on his left hand. He remembered the day Harper had placed it there. A small ceremony outside Santa Fe. 38 guests. Wind lifting the edge of her veil. His father standing beside him alive and smiling. Thomas turned the ring once. Then he removed it. The skin beneath was pale. He placed the ring beside Harper's wine glass. The metal struck the granite with a sharp click. Harper stared at it. You can have more than one night, Thomas said. Her face changed. What is that supposed to mean? It means you don't need my permission. You're threatening divorce because I told you the truth. Thomas stood. No, I'm accepting the choice you already made. Harper looked from him to the ring. You'll calm down. I'm calm now. That's the problem. Thomas picked up his thermos from the counter and walked toward the guest room. Behind him, Harper said, You're going to regret making this bigger than it is. He stopped, but did not turn. It's already bigger than you think. Inside the guest room, Thomas closed the door. He photographed the ring where it remained beside Harper's glass. The image captured the time and date. Then he sent Rachel a brief message. Separation conversation occurred tonight. Harper confirmed planned overnight stay with Cameron Blake tomorrow. I stated that the marriage could not continue unchanged. I have moved to the guest room. Rachel replied 2 minutes later. Do not argue further. Preserve all new records. We will speak at 8:30 a.m. Thomas placed the phone face down. Through the wall, he heard Harper open a cabinet, then another. At 10:14, her footsteps passed the guest room door. She did not knock. Thomas lay awake until after midnight. In the morning, he entered the kitchen at 6:05. Harper was already dressed. She wore a beige coat over a black dress. The red overnight bag stood beside the garage entrance. Her mood had changed. She moved lightly around the kitchen almost cheerfully, as though the conversation had solved a problem. You don't have to make this dramatic, she said. Thomas poured coffee into his thermos. I won't. I'll be back tomorrow. He tightened the lid. Harper waited for him to ask where she would sleep, what she would do, or whether she still loved him. He asked nothing. At 5:31 that evening, Thomas watched from the front window as Harper placed the red bag in her Lexus. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Then she drove away. At 5:47, Thomas entered Rachel Bennett's office. A divorce petition waited on the conference table. Rachel turned the document toward him. read every page. Thomas did. He reached the signature line at 6:12. At the same moment, his phone vibrated. A new charge had appeared on the shared credit card account. The Crawford Hotel, $684.27. Thomas signed his name. Thomas left Rachel Bennett's office at 6:24 p.m. The signed divorce petition remained behind in a blue legal folder. Rachel would file it electronically before the courthouse system closed for the evening. A process server would receive the documents after confirmation. Thomas walked toward his truck beneath a cold Denver sky. He did not feel victorious. He felt precise. There was a difference. A man seeking revenge wanted the other person to witness his pain. Thomas wanted distance-clean records and no decision he would need to explain later. His phone vibrated as he unlocked the truck. Harper had sent a photograph. The image showed a hotel-restaurant table, 2 wine glasses, a white tablecloth, part of a man's sleeve near the lower edge. "Having dinner? I hope you're okay." Thomas studied the message. She had not asked whether he was okay. She had written that she hoped he was, which required nothing from her. He locked the phone without replying. The Crawford Hotel was 12 minutes away. Thomas drove west instead. Elena's hearth occupied a converted brick warehouse in Lakewood, between a plumbing supplier and a small printing company. His younger sister had started the bakery 7 years earlier, with 1 commercial oven and money borrowed from 3 relatives. Now she supplied bread and pastries to 11 coffee shops and 2 neighborhood restaurants. At 6:51, Thomas parked beside the loading entrance. Elena stood outside in a flour-covered apron, holding the door open with one shoulder. "You came fast. What happened? The walk-in cooler started making that metal grinding sound again. Then the temperature climbed 6 degrees. Thomas entered without removing his jacket. The production kitchen smelled of butter cinnamon and warm yeast. Stainless steel tables stood in clean rows beneath bright ceiling lights. Cooling racks held trays of sourdough loaves prepared for morning deliveries. Elena led him toward the rear storage area. "I called the service company," she said. "Their emergency rate starts at $900, before they breathe near it." Thomas crouched beside the cooler's external housing and removed the lower panel. The fan belt had split along one edge. "You have a replacement in the supply cabinet. I ordered one after last time." Thomas looked up. "You're learning. I learned that having you fix everything for free makes me lazy." She brought him the belt and a metal toolbox. Thomas removed his wedding ring out of habit before reaching into the machine. His fingers touched bare skin. He looked down. Elena noticed. She said nothing. Thomas replaced the belt, adjusted the tension, and restarted the motor. The cooler gave a rough shudder before settling into a steady hum. He watched the gauge. 39 degrees, then 38. Elena leaned against the wall. "Good, give it 20 minutes. Thomas tightened the housing bolts. The first bolt clicked into place, then the second. He returned to the first and tightened it again. Elena watched his hand. "You already did that one." Thomas stopped. "I know." He set the wrench down, washed his hands in the utility sink, dried them, then washed them again. Elena folded her arms. "Thomas." He stared at the water circling the drain. She asked to spend the night with Cameron. Elena's face did not change immediately. "What did you say?" "That she didn't need my permission. And then I signed the divorce petition." The cooler motor ran behind them. Elena pulled a wooden stool away from the wall and sat. Thomas remained standing. "Did she go?" Elena asked. "Yes. Tonight, yes." Elena looked toward the clock above the prep table. It was 7:18. "Where is she, the Crawford?" With him, Thomas nodded. Elena pressed her palms together. She had never liked Harper's habit of correcting Thomas in front of other people. She had seen the small dismissals years before he admitted them to himself. Still, she did not say she had warned him. That was one reason Thomas trusted her. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" she asked. "Not all of it." "Okay. There are financial problems. Hidden debt. Money transferred from the house." Elena's eyes narrowed. "How much?" "At least $93,000 between the transfer and the cards." She drew in a slow breath. "And Cameron?" "Some of it went to his company." Elena stood again. "Did she steal from you?" "The lawyers can decide what to call it. That sounds like something your attorney told you to say." "It is." Elena walked to the coffee station and poured 2 cups from an old steel pot. She placed one near him. "You can stay at my place. I already rented an apartment. When 3 days ago." She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "You knew this was coming. I knew I needed somewhere to go. That isn't the same thing." Thomas checked the temperature gauge. 37 degrees. Elena touched his sleeve. "You don't have to act like none of this hurts. I'm not acting." You tightened the same bolt twice. Thomas looked toward the rows of bread cooling beneath the lights. His phone contained photographs from 11 years of marriage. Harper laughing beside a campfire near Estes Park. Harper standing barefoot in their first apartment, painting a wall the wrong shade of blue. Harper asleep against his shoulder during a flight to Chicago. The woman in those photographs had not disappeared in one night. She had become harder to find in small increments, a joke at his expense, a password changed, a lie told without effort, a badge photographed while water ran behind a bathroom door. Thomas picked up his phone and opened an old photograph from the cabin near Evergreen. Harper stood on the porch wearing his coat. Snow covered her hair. She was smiling directly at him. He closed the image. "I keep remembering who she was," he said. Elena lowered her voice. "Maybe she was that person once. That doesn't help." "No." They drank the coffee in silence. At 8:03, Marcus Reed called. Thomas stepped into the loading area before answering. "What happened?" he asked. "We had another suspicious access event," Marcus said. "Altura, yes. Someone called the overnight security desk pretending to be a vendor coordinator." "What did they ask for confirmation that your replacement badge had access to the restricted records floor?" Thomas looked through the open door toward Elena. "Did security provide anything? No. The caller used your home address, employee number, and the last 4 digits of a phone number associated with your household." Thomas gripped the phone. "Which number your wife's?" A delivery truck passed on the road beyond the parking lot. Marcus continued. "The request was denied. The call was recorded. Legal has preserved it. Do they know who called? Not yet?" "Cameron." "We don't speculate." Thomas recognized the correction. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing tonight. Do not contact anyone about this." "I won't." Marcus paused. "Where are you?" "At my sister's bakery. Stay there if you can. The company may contact you tomorrow." The call ended. Thomas returned to the kitchen. Elena saw his expression. Work, yes. Connected, probably. He did not explain further. At 9:12, an alert appeared from the joint credit card account. The Crawford Hotel Bar, $147.60. At 10:46, another charge appeared. Room service, $96.38. Thomas saved both records to the encrypted folder. He did not block the card. He did not call the hotel. He did not drive downtown. At 1:14 a.m., Harper sent a text. "I'm not coming home tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." Thomas read it once. He replied, "Understood." Rachel called 7 minutes later. "The petition has been accepted," she said. "The process server can deliver it tomorrow morning." Thomas looked at the bakery's dark front windows. "What time between 8 and 9? We have the hotel information from the joint card, but tell me now if you want service delayed." "No." "Are you certain?" "Yes." "Then do not contact Harper again tonight." Thomas ended the call. At 1:52, he returned to the house. The rooms felt larger without Harper in them. He entered the bedroom and removed only what Rachel had approved: his passport, birth certificate, employment records, the encrypted drive, 2 changes of clothes, work equipment, a small box of family photographs. From the top drawer, he took his father's watch. Luis Rodriguez had worn it every day for 23 years. The brown leather strap was cracked near the buckle. The hands had stopped at 4:16 shortly after his death. Thomas held it for several seconds before placing it in his bag. He left the furniture. He left the television. He left the joint checkbook. He left Harper's jewelry exactly where it was. At 2:27, Thomas closed the front door and drove to his furnished apartment near Sloan's Lake. He slept for less than 3 hours. At 8:07 the next morning, Harper opened the door of her hotel room. She wore a white robe. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. A process server stood in the hallway holding a sealed envelope. Harper Rodriguez. She looked past him, as though Thomas might be waiting near the elevator. "He isn't here," the server said. Then he held out the divorce papers. Harper returned to the house at 10:46 that morning. Thomas knew because the smart garage system sent an automatic notification to both owners. Garage door opened. 30 seconds later, his phone began ringing. He was standing in the mechanical control room at Altura, reviewing temperature data with a technician. Harper's name filled the screen. Thomas declined the call. A message arrived immediately. "Where are you, then another? Answer me." He turned the phone face down and finished reviewing the cooling report. At 11:03, Rachel Bennett called. "Harper has contacted my office," she said. "What did she say? That she wants the petition withdrawn before anyone else learns about it?" Thomas stepped into the hallway. "Did she hire an attorney?" "Not yet. My assistant told her we cannot advise her. What should I do?" "Do not meet her alone if she is agitated. Keep communication in writing. If you need to enter the house, tell me first." Thomas looked through the glass wall toward the elevators. "My belongings are already out." "Good. Then there is no reason to go back today." At 11:18, Harper sent him a photograph of the divorce petition spread across the kitchen island. The ring he had removed the night before still rested beside the wine glass. "You planned this." Thomas read the sentence twice. She was correct. He had planned to protect himself. That did not mean he had created the facts that made protection necessary, he replied. "Please direct legal questions to Rachel Bennett at Bennett, Sloan, and Pierce. Her contact information is on page 2. Harper called again. Thomas did not answer. By noon, she had left 7 voicemails. He listened to none of them. Rachel had explained that written communication preserved exact language. Voicemails did too, but hearing Harper's voice would serve no useful purpose while Thomas was at work. At 12:27, Marcus Reed entered Thomas's office and closed the door. "You all right?" "Yes. You don't look rested." "I'm not." Marcus placed a thin file on the desk. "The caller from last night used a prepaid phone. It was activated 3 days ago, near Denver. A store in Lakewood. Cash purchase." Thomas waited. Marcus did not open the file. "Corporate legal wants you separated from this investigation as much as possible," he said. "You'll cooperate when asked, but you will not receive regular updates. I understand. There is another issue. Someone attempted to access an internal vendor schedule using credentials connected to an external contractor. Successful numbers connected to the same person we don't know." Thomas disliked the answer, but he accepted it. Marcus looked toward the phone. "Your wife?" "Yes." "Does she know about the badge investigation? Not from me. Keep it that way." Thomas nodded. At 1:11, Harper sent a new message. "Come home tonight. We need to talk like adults." Thomas typed a response, deleted it, and wrote a shorter one. "I will communicate about the separation in writing or through counsel." Her reply arrived almost instantly. "You don't get to hide behind a lawyer after humiliating me in a hotel." Thomas felt his jaw tighten. He looked at the sentence until the anger passed through him without reaching his hands. He had not chosen the hotel. He had not chosen Cameron. He had not opened hidden credit accounts or borrowed against the house. Yet Harper described the service of lawful documents as humiliation, while treating every act that came before it as private freedom. Thomas saved the message. At 5:30, he drove to the furnished apartment near Sloan's Lake. The building was 4 stories tall, with beige hallways and a lobby that smelled faintly of floor cleaner. His unit contained a gray couch, a narrow dining table, and framed photographs of mountains chosen by someone who had never visited them. Thomas placed his work bag beside the door. The silence felt different from the silence in the house. The house had carried absence. The apartment carried space. At 6:02, someone knocked. Thomas checked the hallway through the peephole. Harper stood outside in the same beige coat she had worn to the hotel. Her red overnight bag was not with her. He did not open the door immediately. "Thomas," she said, "I know you're in there." He sent Rachel a message. "Harper is outside my apartment unexpectedly." Rachel called at once. "Do you feel threatened?" "No." "Then you may speak through the closed door or open it if you choose. Keep the conversation brief. Do not discuss evidence. Do not agree to anything." Thomas opened the door but remained inside the threshold. Harper looked past him into the apartment. "You rented this before last night?" "Yes." Her face hardened. So the whole conversation was a trap. "No. You knew what you were going to do before I asked. I knew I needed somewhere to live. You let me go to that hotel knowing I'd be served. You had already decided to go." Harper stepped closer. "I gave you honesty." Thomas looked at her. "No. You gave me a request after the room was booked." Her lips pressed together. "You could have stopped me. I'm not responsible for stopping you from making your own choices. You're my husband." "I was." The words landed between them. Harper's eyes moved again toward the apartment. "This is ridiculous. Withdraw the petition. We can go home and talk." "The petition stays." "You don't mean that. I signed it. People sign things when they're angry. I wasn't angry when I signed. That makes it worse." Thomas understood what she meant. Anger could fade. Preparation did not. Harper folded her arms. "What are you asking for an equitable division? Full financial disclosure? Preservation of records?" Her expression shifted. "What records? Banking? Credit? Property? Electronic communications relevant to marital assets? You've been going through my accounts. I reviewed records I had lawful access to. This is financial abuse. No. You moved your paycheck. Future income is going into a separate account. I am continuing my share of the mortgage insurance and required household expenses. You left me with nothing. The joint checking and savings accounts remain untouched." Harper looked away. Thomas saw the calculation in her actions, not her thoughts. Her fingers moved against the strap of her purse. Her breathing slowed. Her voice changed when she spoke again. "Cameron will return the money." Thomas did not react. What money? Harper's eyes snapped back to his. For 1 second she understood the mistake. Then she recovered. "The money you obviously think I spent. I didn't name an amount." She stepped backward. "You are twisting everything I say. I'm listening." Harper's voice rose. "You have no idea what Cameron is building. That investment could have changed our lives. Our home equity changed his business account. It was temporary. Without my knowledge, I was going to replace it. With what?" She said nothing. Thomas let the silence remain. Harper reached into her purse and removed Rachel's business card. She held it between 2 fingers. "You really expect me to talk to this woman instead of my husband? For legal matters, yes. And for us, there is no us to negotiate tonight." Her face became still. Then she placed the card on the floor between them. "You're going to regret this." Thomas looked down at the card. "No threats, Harper. That wasn't a threat. Then choose better words." She turned and walked toward the elevator. Thomas closed the door. He photographed the business card where it lay recorded the time, and sent Rachel a factual summary of the conversation. The next morning, Harper retained an attorney. By afternoon, Rachel received notice that Harper intended to challenge the temporary financial arrangements. She claimed Thomas had abandoned the home and withheld marital income. Rachel responded with records showing that Thomas had left the joint funds untouched and scheduled automatic payments for half the mortgage utilities insurance and property taxes. 3 days later, Harper's premium travel card was declined at a restaurant in Cherry Creek. The alert appeared only because the account remained connected to the household credit monitoring service. Her available credit had fallen below $100. The second hidden card was less than $300 from its limit. Cameron had returned none of the $25,000. On Friday morning, Rachel called Thomas. Harper contacted a title company about the Evergreen cabin. Thomas stood beside his truck in Altura's underground garage. To sell it, to request a preliminary closing package. She represented that she had authority to act for both owners. She doesn't. The title company noticed your signature was missing and contacted the address on the deed. Thomas closed his eyes briefly. The cabin had belonged to his father. Luis had left Thomas a portion of the down payment. Thomas and Harper later refinanced it together, turning the property into a marital asset, but the place still carried his father's hands in every repaired stair and cedar shelf. "Can she sell it?" he asked. "Not without your signature. I have notified the title company and filed a temporary restraint against transfer." Thomas looked at the concrete wall across from him. "She's moving fast, because pressure is increasing." Rachel paused. "We are also serving a preservation notice today. What does it cover?" "Email accounts, cloud storage, banking records, real estate files, text messages, and communications with Cameron Blake, or any Blake Summit entity." At 4:38 that afternoon, the notice reached Harper's attorney. At 4:51, Harper sent Thomas one message. You included Cameron's name. Thomas read it from his office. He did not respond. A second message appeared. "How much do you know?" Thomas locked the phone and placed it beside the yellow striped badge on his desk. For the first time since the hotel, Harper was no longer asking him to come home. She was asking what evidence had followed him out. Harper answered her own question before Thomas ever did. 3 days after the preservation notice, she began telling people what she wanted them to believe. Thomas learned about it on a Sunday afternoon at a neighborhood cookout hosted by Brian and Madison Keller. He had considered skipping the gathering. Rachel advised him not to isolate himself or change his routine without reason. "Attend if you normally would," she had said. "Do not discuss the case. Do not defend yourself with private evidence." So Thomas arrived at 2:15 carrying a covered tray from Elena's bakery. The Kellers lived 4 houses from the home he had shared with Harper. Folding chairs covered the backyard. Smoke rose from a gas grill. Children ran between the patio and a plastic basketball hoop. Thomas wore jeans, a gray shirt, and the faded navy jacket Harper disliked. Conversations weakened when he entered, not stopped, weakened. People lowered their voices. 2 women near the drink table looked away too quickly. Brian Keller accepted the tray and thanked him with the careful politeness usually reserved for someone recovering from surgery. Thomas noticed all of it. He said nothing. Madison approached 5 minutes later holding a glass of iced tea. "I'm sorry about everything," she said. Thomas looked at her. "What have you heard?" Madison shifted the glass between her hands. "Just that you and Harper are separating." "That part is true. She said it happened very suddenly." Thomas waited. Madison lowered her voice. "She said she asked for space and you moved out, froze her access to money, and filed for divorce without warning." Thomas felt heat move slowly beneath his collar. The joint checking account still held more than $19,000. The savings account remained untouched. His automatic payments continued every Friday. Harper's hidden cards had reached their limits because of her own spending, not because Thomas had blocked them. "She still has access to the joint accounts," he said. Madison's expression changed. "Only slightly. She said you redirected everything. My future paycheck goes to my account. The existing marital funds remain where they were. Madison looked toward the patio where 3 of Harper's friends stood together. I don't want to be in the middle. Then don't be. Thomas's tone was not hostile. It was final. He walked toward the grill. Brian handed him a bottle of sparkling water and studied him for several seconds. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Did you really lock Harper out of the house? No. Did you cancel her credit cards? No. Brian nodded, but uncertainty remained in his face. Thomas understood why. Harper worked in luxury real estate. She sold confidence for a living. She knew how to arrange facts in the order most useful to her. Thomas had only records. Records moved more slowly than stories. Across the yard, someone laughed too loudly. Thomas saw Madison whisper something to another woman. The woman glanced toward him, then lowered her eyes. He stayed for 40 minutes. He ate nothing. Before leaving, he thanked Brian and carried his unopened sparkling water to the truck. Inside the cab, he sat with both hands on the steering wheel. He wanted to return to the backyard. He wanted to tell them about the $68,400 in hidden debt, the $25,000 home equity transfer, the hotel charges, the photographed badge, the man in the delivery uniform. One folder of documents could have changed every expression in that yard. Thomas started the engine instead. Public victory would cost him legal credibility. He drove away. That evening, Harper posted a statement online. Thomas did not follow her account, but 3 people sent him screenshots within an hour. Sometimes choosing honesty means accepting punishment from someone who benefited from your silence. I am learning that emotional control can look calm from the outside. I am grateful for the people helping me rebuild. She did not use Thomas's name. She did not need to. The post received more than 200 reactions by morning. Comments called her brave. One described her as a survivor. Another said quiet men were often the most dangerous because no one saw the control until the door closed. Thomas read that sentence twice. Then he saved the screenshot and sent it to Rachel. Her response arrived 9 minutes later. Do not reply. Do not ask others to reply. We will preserve it. Thomas placed the phone beside his coffee. He understood the instruction. He still hated it. At Altura, he entered through the underground garage at 6:48. 2 security officers greeted him by name. The ordinary exchange steadied him. His first task involved a faulty airflow sensor on the 10th floor. His second involved a delivery company that had sent a substitute driver without updated identification. Thomas denied entry. The driver complained. Thomas remained calm. Your authorization lists another employee. He called out sick. Then your company can submit a replacement request. I have 6 pallets downstairs, and they will remain downstairs. The driver stared at Thomas's yellow striped badge. Do you know how much time this costs? Yes? Thomas closed the access form. Come back with proper authorization. At 10:20, Marcus Reed asked Thomas to meet in his office. A woman from Altura's legal department sat beside him. She introduced herself as Evelyn Shaw, Associate General Counsel. A printed copy of Harper's social media statement lay on the table. Thomas looked at Marcus. How did that get here? Several employees saw it, Marcus said. Evelyn folded her hands. The Post does not name Altura, but we need to know whether public allegations could affect your work or the investigation. They won't affect my work. That wasn't the question. Thomas sat straighter. Harper is describing the divorce from her perspective. I have not responded. Are any restraining orders involved? Evelyn asked. No. Domestic violence allegations? No. Claims that you accessed her private data illegally. She accused me in person of going through her accounts. Everything I reviewed was shared or lawfully available. Evelyn made a note. Marcus watched Thomas. Do you need leave? No. Think before answering. I already did. The answer came sharper than Thomas intended. Marcus did not react. Thomas lowered his voice. I need work to remain work. Evelyn closed the folder. Then continue documenting any direct public claims. Do not reference Altura, its systems, or the badge incident. I won't. After the meeting, Thomas returned to his office and completed an emergency generator inspection report. At 1:36, Rachel called. Hawthorne and Vale has opened an internal review involving Harper. Thomas turned away from the open doorway. Because of the divorce number a client complaint. What kind? An escrow irregularity. Rachel explained that one of Harper's former clients, an orthopedic surgeon named Dr. Stephen Wallace, had reviewed a closing statement from a commercial property purchase. A $12,000 advisory fee had been transferred to Front Range Strategic Holdings. The entity linked to Cameron. Was the payment authorized? Thomas asked. That is what the brokerage is investigating. Did Harper process it? Her name appears in the file. Thomas looked at the notebook beside his keyboard. The pressure around Harper was no longer coming only from him. Her firm had found its own problem. Do we do anything? He asked. Nothing. We wait for lawful discovery. At 4:17, Harper sent Thomas a message longer than any she had written since the separation. He read it from the parking garage after work. I don't want this to become permanent. I know the hotel hurt you, but I was confused, and Cameron gave me a chance to understand what I had left unresolved. I can come home. We can put the lawyers aside. Cameron has promised to repay the money after the Altura deal closes, so there is no reason to destroy 11 years over something temporary. Withdraw the petition and I will stop seeing him. Thomas remained still. Cars moved past him toward the exit ramp. He read one sentence again. Cameron has promised to repay the money after the Altura deal closes. Harper had just connected Cameron the missing money and Altura's confidential transaction in writing. Thomas took screenshots. He exported the full message. Then he forwarded it to Rachel and Marcus. Marcus called within 3 minutes. Do not respond to her, he said. I wasn't going to. Corporate legal is preserving this immediately. What happens now, you stay out of it. The line ended. At 5:02, Marcus sent one final message. Federal investigators have requested a meeting with Altura's compliance team tomorrow morning. Thomas stood beside his truck with the phone in his hand. Harper had tried to repair her story. Instead, she had written the first sentence that could bring the entire structure down. The federal meeting began at 8:00 the next morning. Thomas was not invited. Marcus Reed had made that clear in a message sent before sunrise. Compliance and legal will handle the meeting. Continue your normal duties. Remain available. Thomas read it while standing in the kitchen of his apartment drinking black coffee from the same stainless steel thermos he had carried for years. Continue your normal duties. The phrase had become an anchor. At 7:03, he entered Altura through the underground garage. He inspected a fire control panel on the 8th floor, approved a refrigeration contractor for the laboratory wing, and rejected a visitor request missing a government-issued identification number. Outside the conference rooms, federal investigators were asking questions about his wife. Thomas kept working. At 10:16, Rachel Bennett called. I received Harper's proposed explanation for the $25,000 transfer. Thomas stepped into an empty service corridor. What is it? She claims it was a temporary investment made for the benefit of the marriage, without telling me. Yes, using home equity, yes, under a false renovation description. Rachel paused. That part is difficult for her. Thomas looked toward a red exit sign above the stairwell. What does she say Cameron was investing in? She calls it a private healthcare opportunity. Her attorney did not provide supporting documents. There aren't any. Do not assume that. We will request them. Thomas understood the correction. Rachel continued. Harper also claims Cameron promised a return large enough to pay off the home equity line and both private cards. Thomas tightened his grip on the phone. She used our house to cover her debt. That is what the records may show. Let the records show it. After the call, Thomas returned to his office. At 11:42, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Conference room 9. Thomas followed him upstairs. Evelyn Shaw was already seated at the table. Beside her sat a man Thomas had never met. He wore a dark suit, carried no visible briefcase, and introduced himself as Special Agent Aaron Pike. The name confirmed what Marcus had not said directly. The investigation had moved beyond Altura. Agent Pike placed a legal pad in front of him. "Mr. Rodriguez, you are here as a witness. You are not accused of wrongdoing." Thomas sat. "I understand. We need to establish what information your wife could have obtained from you, your home, and your normal routines." Evelyn spoke before Thomas could answer. "Limit responses to direct knowledge. Do not speculate." Thomas nodded. Agent Pike began with ordinary questions. What did Thomas discuss at home? Did Harper know the names of Altura executives? Had she ever visited the building? Did she have access to his work computer? Did Thomas bring confidential documents home? No, Thomas said. Never. What did you tell her about the acquisition? Nothing specific. I mentioned that executive visitors were increasing and that temporary office space was being prepared. When over several months. Did you name the target company? No. Did you describe its industry? Thomas thought carefully. I may have said the visitors worked in surgical technology. Agent Pike wrote one line. What about building access? Harper asked questions. Thomas opened his notebook. He read the dated entries. North entrance. Vendor access after hours. Temporary record storage. Executive visitor schedules. Agent Pike did not interrupt. When Thomas finished, he asked, at the time, did you believe those questions were connected? Not at first. When did that change? When I found the badge photographs. Marcus placed printed copies on the table. Agent Pike studied them. We have evidence that the information went further than the badge, he said. Thomas looked at Marcus. Marcus's face remained still. Agent Pike turned a page. Blake Summit Capital was attempting to raise funds based on what it described as an imminent medical robotics transaction. Potential investors were told Cameron Blake had access to information unavailable to the public. Thomas felt the room narrow. What information? We are still determining that. That isn't what I asked. Evelyn looked toward him. Thomas. He stopped. Agent Pike continued without reacting. Mr. Blake's firm presented financial projections tied to Altura acquiring a privately held surgical robotics company. The acquisition has not been publicly announced. Thomas sat back. The target's industry was known internally to fewer than 50 people. The identity of the company was known to fewer still. Agent Pike placed 3 printed pages on the table. The pages were heavily redacted, but several lines remained visible. Executive arrival windows, restricted floor activity, visitor parking assignments, outside legal counsel schedule. Thomas recognized the format. These are based on our building operations, he said. Marcus nodded once. Some details match internal schedules. How did Cameron get them? That is under investigation, Agent Pike said. Thomas looked at the pages. Harper had asked whether executive visitors used the north entrance. She had asked where temporary files were kept. She had asked how vendors entered after hours. The questions had sounded casual because she had placed them inside ordinary life. The information had not remained ordinary. Agent Pike turned another page. Blake Summit appears to have planned 3 forms of benefit. First, using alleged inside access to attract investors. Second, purchasing securities through third-party entities positioned to benefit from the acquisition. Third, acquiring interests in suppliers connected to the target company. Through shell companies, Thomas said. We believe so. Front Range Strategic Holdings. Agent Pike did not confirm it. His silence was enough. Thomas rose from the chair. He did not intend to. One moment he was seated. The next, both hands were pressed against the table. The pen between his fingers cracked. A thin line of blue ink spread across his palm. No one moved. Thomas looked down at the broken plastic. Harper had used details from his work, not stolen from a locked cabinet, taken from dinner conversations, shared calendars, photographs, and routines. She had converted trust into access. Agent Pike pushed a box of tissues across the table. Thomas wiped the ink from his hand. "Did she know what he planned?" he asked. "We do not discuss another witness's state of mind." Thomas remained standing. "I'm not asking what she felt. I'm asking what she did." Agent Pike considered him. "We have evidence that your wife supplied photographs, executive names, visitor patterns, and building access information. We are still evaluating her knowledge of the securities activity." Thomas stared at the redacted pages. A memory returned. Harper at the grocery store, asking whether approved vendors could enter after hours. Her voice light, her eyes turned toward the passenger window. He had answered because she was his wife, not because the information was harmless. At 1:20, the meeting ended. Marcus followed Thomas into the hallway. "Go home for the day." "No. That wasn't a suggestion. I can work. You broke a pen in front of a federal agent." Thomas looked at the ink remaining beneath his thumbnail. "I didn't threaten anyone." "No, but you are not as controlled as you think." Thomas's jaw tightened. Marcus lowered his voice. "Take the afternoon. Do not contact Harper. Do not contact Cameron." Thomas returned to his office, collected his jacket, and left. At 2:07, while he was driving toward Sloan's Lake, an unfamiliar number called. He let it ring once before answering through the truck's speaker. "Thomas Rodriguez. Thomas. Cameron Blake." Thomas kept his eyes on the road. "How did you get this number? We've known each other long enough to skip that." "We don't know each other." Cameron laughed softly. "I think we should meet." "No. One conversation, Union Station, public place. Speak to your attorney. This doesn't need attorneys. It does now." Cameron's tone changed. Harper made emotional choices. "You're turning them into something criminal." Thomas said nothing. "You reported a fake security problem because your wife chose me," Cameron continued. "That's going to look bad when people understand the timing." The traffic light ahead turned red. Thomas stopped the truck. The badge attempt happened before the hotel. Silence came through the speakers. Only 2 seconds. Still enough. Cameron recovered. "I don't know what you're talking about. Then you have nothing to discuss with me. You think paperwork makes you powerful? No. What then?" Thomas watched the light, the truth that creates it. He ended the call. Cameron called again. Thomas did not answer. He saved the number, documented the time, and forwarded the information to Rachel and Marcus. At 3:18, Marcus responded. "Do not delete anything. Federal investigators will contact you." 10 minutes later, Rachel called. "Cameron's threat helps establish pressure and possible interference," she said. "Do not engage again." "I won't." At 5:42, Marcus sent Thomas a photograph extracted from Altura's investigation. It showed a delivery authorization code printed on a temporary vendor sheet. Beneath it was a second image, a photograph Harper had sent Cameron 3 weeks earlier. Thomas's badge lay beside a page from his work notebook. In the corner of that page, the same delivery code was visible. Harper had photographed more than the badge. At 6:11, Agent Pike called. "The man in the delivery uniform has been identified," he said. Thomas stood beside the apartment window, looking across the dark water of Sloan's Lake. "Who is he?" "Derek Holloway, Operations Director at Blake Summit Capital." Thomas closed his eyes. The breach was no longer a theory. It had a face, a job title, and a direct line back to Cameron. Agent Pike's voice remained measured. "We believe Mr. Holloway used information supplied from your household to enter Altura." Thomas looked at the pale mark where his wedding ring had been. Harper had asked for one night of freedom. But long before that night, she had already opened the door to something much larger. Harper's deposition began at 9:06 on a Thursday morning. The conference room at Bennett Sloan and Pierce was designed to remove distraction. Gray walls, a long walnut table, 6 leather chairs, bottled water arranged beside yellow legal pads, a digital clock mounted above the door. Thomas sat beside Rachel Bennett with a closed folder in front of him. Across the table, Harper wore a navy suit and a white blouse. Her hair was pulled back neatly. A small diamond necklace rested against her throat. Her attorney Samuel Whitmore sat at her right. The court reporter adjusted a microphone and asked Harper to raise her hand. "Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth I do?" Harper lowered her hand. For one brief moment, she looked at Thomas. He did not look away. Rachel began with simple questions. Full name, current address, occupation, date of marriage, date of separation. Harper answered each one clearly. Her voice was controlled. Rachel asked when she had reconnected with Cameron Blake. "Late January," Harper said. Rachel glanced at the document in front of her. "January of this year?" "Yes." "Was that your first contact with Mr. Blake since college?" "Yes." Thomas felt his jaw tighten. The mobile records showed the first call in October. Rachel placed a document before Harper. "Do you recognize this?" Harper looked down. "It appears to be a phone statement." "Your phone statement, I believe so." Rachel directed her attention to a highlighted number. "Is that Cameron Blake's number?" Harper hesitated. "Yes." "The first call shown here occurred on October 17th. It lasted 38 minutes. Were you speaking with Mr. Blake?" "I don't remember. You testified less than a minute ago that you had no contact with him before late January. I may have forgotten one call." Rachel turned the page. There were 26 calls between October 17th and January 1st. Samuel Whitmore leaned toward the microphone. "Objection. The document speaks for itself." Rachel continued. "Were all 26 calls accidental?" Harper's lips pressed together. "No." "Then when did you reconnect with Mr. Blake? I suppose it was October?" Rachel wrote something on her legal pad. Thomas knew the correction mattered less than the ease with which the first answer had been given. The court reporter's fingers continued moving. Rachel next asked about the 2 private credit cards. Harper admitted opening them. "Did Thomas know about either account?" "I assumed he did." "What caused you to make that assumption?" "We were married. We shared financial information." "Did you show him the statements?" "No." "Did you discuss the balances?" "No." "Did you include the accounts in the household budget?" "No." "Did you send the statements to a shared email address?" Rachel placed 2 account summaries on the table. The combined balance was $68,400 at the time of separation. "Is that accurate? I would have to review the statements. They are in front of you." Harper looked at them. "Yes." Rachel asked about the spending. Hotels, restaurants, designer clothing, travel deposits. Harper characterized each purchase as related to her real estate career or personal image. "Were the charges at the Crawford Hotel business expenses?" Rachel asked. "Some were. Which clients attended, I don't remember. Were any client names listed in your calendar? I would need to check." "Did Cameron Blake attend?" Samuel spoke again. "Objection. Relevance. The question concerns marital spending," Rachel said. Harper lifted her water bottle, but did not drink. "Yes. Cameron was there on some occasions." Thomas looked at the folder before him. Rachel had warned him that depositions were not trials. The goal was not to win each exchange. It was to create a record precise enough that contradictions could not later be reshaped. Rachel moved to the home equity withdrawal. "Did you authorize a $25,000 transfer from the marital home equity line?" "Yes." "Did Thomas authorize it?" "I believed I had authority to make household investments. That was not my question." Harper shifted in her chair. "No." Rachel displayed the transfer description. "Kitchen renovation deposit." "Who entered those words? I don't remember. The bank record shows the description was entered from your online profile." "Then I probably did." "Was there a kitchen renovation?" "No." "Was Aspen Grove Interiors a real company? I thought it was connected to Cameron's investment structure." Rachel's eyes remained on Harper. Did Cameron tell you to use that description? Samuel leaned forward. I instruct the witness not to disclose privileged communications with her own counsel. I did not ask about her counsel, Rachel said. Harper looked at Samuel, then back at Rachel. I don't remember exactly how the wording was chosen. Rachel placed the transfer confirmation beside the credit statements. The exhibits formed a straight line across the table. Phone records, debt, false transfer description, Blake Summit payment. The sequence made the pattern visible without Rachel naming it. She asked when Harper first became romantically involved with Cameron. Harper answered that nothing physical happened before the hotel night. Rachel introduced the Crawford receipt Thomas had found beneath the passenger seat. Were you at this hotel on February 4th? Yes. With Cameron? Yes. Did you tell Thomas you were showing a property and Boulder Harper's face remained still? I may have said that because I was afraid of his reaction. Thomas felt anger move through him. Harper had told friends he was emotionally controlling. Now she was using the fear of his reaction to explain a lie made before he had confronted her about anything. Rachel did not challenge the claim directly. Had Thomas ever threatened you? No. Had he ever struck you? No. Blocked you from leaving the house? No. Taken your phone? No. Prevented you from working? No. Harper's hands folded more tightly in her lap. Rachel asked about the night Harper requested permission to stay with Cameron. Harper described herself as confused and desperate, to be honest. You had already booked the room, Rachel said. Yes. You had already purchased the red overnight bag. Yes. You had already arranged for Cameron to meet you. Yes. So what decision remained for Thomas to influence Harper looked toward the court reporter. I hoped he would understand. Rachel opened a new exhibit. This is a message exchange between you and Cameron 3 days before that conversation. Thomas had not seen the full exchange before. Rachel read one message aloud. If Thomas agrees to one night, he can't claim I betrayed him. After that, we can keep things open until the fund closes. Thomas felt the room become colder. Rachel continued. Cameron's response appeared beneath it. He's too passive to fight. Just make it sound like honesty. Thomas closed his folder carefully. He did not look at Harper. The sentence did not hurt because Cameron had called him passive. It hurt because Harper had built her plan around the same belief. Rachel asked, What did you mean by keep things open until the fund closes? Harper's voice lowered. I don't remember the exact context. Did you intend to remain in the marital home? Yes. Continue using joint funds. We were still married. Remain on Thomas's health insurance. Yes. Allow him to continue paying household expenses. He always handled those, and continue seeing Cameron Harper's attorney objected again. Harper answered anyway. I didn't know what I wanted. Rachel placed another exhibit on the table, a photograph of Thomas's Altura badge. Did you take this photograph? Harper looked at it. No. Thomas finally raised his eyes. Rachel placed the file information beside the image. The metadata identifies your phone. Harper swallowed. Then I may have taken it. Why, it was a joke. What was funny about photographing both sides of your husband's security credential, I don't know. Cameron was curious about Thomas's job. Did you send the photograph to Cameron, I may have? Rachel introduced a second photograph, showing the badge beside Thomas's notebook. The delivery authorization code was visible in the corner. Did you send this image as well? Harper looked at Samuel. He whispered something to her. Yes. Did you know the code was visible? No. Did Cameron ask for it? He asked what the numbers meant. What did you tell him that Thomas used them for deliveries? Thomas pressed his thumb against the edge of the folder. Rachel asked about Altura's north entrance executive visitor schedules and restricted floors. Harper admitted discussing each topic with Cameron, but insisted she believed his interest was connected to legitimate healthcare investments. Rachel did not accuse her of knowing about the access attempt. Instead, she returned to the badge. Did Thomas give you permission to photograph it? Did he give you permission to send it to Cameron? Did you tell Thomas after you did so? No. Did you delete the photographs? Yes. Why I didn't think they mattered. Rachel allowed several seconds to pass. Then why delete them? Harper looked down. I don't remember. Samuel requested a break. The court reporter stopped the recording at 11:38. Harper rose quickly and walked into the hallway. Thomas remained seated until Rachel touched his sleeve. Stay here, she said. I need water. Wait 1 minute. Thomas waited. When he eventually entered the hallway, Harper stood near the elevators alone. Her attorney had stepped into another office to make a call. She moved toward Thomas. I didn't know anyone would use the badge. Thomas stopped several feet away. You should speak through your attorney. Cameron said it was for a presentation. Through your attorney, Harper. You think I wanted someone to break into Altura? Thomas looked at her. I don't know what you wanted anymore. Her face tightened. I was trying to build something better, with my badge, with an opportunity. Thomas stepped back. Talk to your lawyer. He returned to the conference room. The deposition resumed 12 minutes later. Rachel introduced the attempted cabin sale and the false representation that Harper could sign for both owners. Harper admitted contacting the title company, but claimed she had only wanted to understand the cabin's value. Then, Rachel returned to the badge photograph one final time. You testified that it was a joke, Rachel said. Yes. You testified that Cameron wanted it for a presentation. That is what he told me. You testified that you did not believe it would be used for access. Correct. Rachel placed a still image from Altura's security footage on the table. Derek Holloway stood at the restricted floor reader holding a badge bearing Thomas's photograph. Harper stared at it. Rachel's voice remained quiet. Then why did he use it? No one spoke. Even the court reporter's hands stopped moving. The first visible crack in Blake Summit Capital appeared 4 days after Harper's deposition. At 7:40 on Monday morning, Cameron's downtown office landlord posted a notice on the 6th floor glass doors. Access suspended pending payment. By noon, a photograph of the notice had reached 3 local investment groups. Thomas did not see the photograph until Rachel Bennett forwarded it that evening. Do not circulate this, she wrote. Public record only. Preserve for context. Thomas saved the image and closed the message. He did not smile. The collapse of Cameron's business would not restore the money Harper had transferred. It would not erase the badge photograph or return Thomas to the night before he found the hotel receipt. Failure was not justice by itself. Sometimes it was only failure. Over the following week, Blake Summit began losing the appearance it had spent years constructing. The black Range Rover disappeared from Cameron's social media photographs. Public vehicle records later showed that the leasing company had repossessed it from a private parking garage. A catering company filed a claim for $14,800 in unpaid event invoices. 2 former employees sued for withheld commissions. The marketing agency that had already taken Cameron to court amended its complaint, alleging that Blake Summit had continued ordering promotional work after knowing it could not pay. Then investors began requesting their money. One of them filed an emergency petition claiming Cameron had moved funds between related companies without authorization. Another stated that financial reports included investment opportunities that did not yet exist. Thomas read only the records Rachel sent him. He did not search Cameron's name each morning. He did not visit the office. He did not contact investors. Marcus Reed had warned him that curiosity could become interference if he crossed the wrong line. Thomas remained where the evidence placed him. At Altura, the investigation expanded. Derek Holloway stopped reporting to Blake Summit's office. Federal agents executed a search warrant at his apartment and removed 3 computers, 2 phones, and several bankers' boxes. Cameron stopped calling Thomas. That silence felt temporary rather than peaceful. Harper's professional life began to narrow at the same time. Hawthorne and Vale Realty suspended her pending the outcome of its internal review. The company removed her photograph from its website and reassigned her active property listings to other agents. The Colorado Division of Real Estate opened a licensing inquiry into the unexplained fee connected to Front Range Strategic Holdings. Harper was not formally accused of theft. The inquiry focused on documentation disclosure and whether client funds had been directed toward an entity connected to her personal relationship. Rachel explained the distinction during a meeting. An investigation is not a finding, she said. Do not describe it as one. Thomas sat across from her with a cup of coffee he had not touched. I haven't described it to anyone. I know, keep doing that. Rachel turned to a new page in her file. Harper wants to speak with you. No. She says Cameron deceived her. That may be true. She claims she did not understand the investment structure. That may also be true. Rachel watched him, but Thomas looked toward the window. But she understood that she took $25,000 from the house and hid where it went. Rachel nodded. That is the relevant marital issue. Harper contacted him directly that night. Her message arrived at 9:17. Cameron lied about everything. The fund, the investors, the repayment. I made mistakes, but I was deceived too. Please help me fix this before I lose my career. Thomas read it at the narrow dining table in his apartment. A takeout container sat unopened beside his laptop. It had been there since the previous evening. He had begun buying food and forgetting to eat it. His sleep came in pieces. 2 hours, then 40 minutes, then another hour before dawn. At work, he remained precise. At home, he sometimes stood in the kitchen, unable to remember why he had entered it. Thomas typed a response. Cameron's deception does not erase the choices documented in the financial records. Please communicate through counsel. He sent it before emotion could add another sentence. Harper replied, You loved me for 11 years. Doesn't that matter now? Thomas turned off the phone. It mattered. That was the problem. If nothing had mattered, leaving would have been simple. The following Saturday, Elena came to the apartment carrying soup bread and 3 containers of prepared meals. She opened the refrigerator and found 2 bottles of water mustard and spoiled milk. This isn't eating, she said. I eat at work. No, you drink coffee at work. Thomas leaned against the counter. I'm fine. Elena removed the expired milk. You look like Dad did when he refused to admit he was sick. Thomas's face hardened. Don't do that. Then stop making me guess whether you're sleeping. He looked away. Elena softened her voice. You can be right about Harper and still grieve her. Thomas sat at the table. Elena placed the soup in front of him, but did not ask him to eat. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then Thomas said, I remember our first apartment. Elena sat opposite him. The one with the broken heater. Harper slept in 2 coats while I fixed it. She kept making jokes because I was so angry at the landlord. A faint smile appeared and disappeared. She wasn't always like this. No, Elena said. Thomas rubbed a hand across his face. I keep thinking there must have been a moment when I could have stopped it. Stopped what, all of it? You mean controlled another adult? Thomas looked at her. Elena continued. You could have noticed sooner. You could have asked different questions. That doesn't mean you created the decisions she made. The words sounded similar to Rachel's legal advice, but Elena's version reached somewhere records could not. Thomas opened the soup. The next morning he drove to the mountain cabin near Evergreen. The court's temporary order allowed both owners access, but prohibited either from transferring or removing significant property. Thomas wanted to inspect the plumbing after a week of freezing temperatures. The cabin stood beyond a narrow road lined with pine trees. Snow remained in the shaded areas beside the porch. Thomas unlocked the front door at 9:06. The interior smelled of cedar, cold stone, and dust. Something was wrong. The framed photographs had been removed from the living room wall. Kitchen dishes were wrapped in newspaper. 3 cardboard boxes stood near the front entrance labeled with Harper's handwriting. Dining room. Linens. Office. Thomas did not open them. He photographed each box where it stood. In the bedroom closet, doors were open. Empty hangers leaned against one another. A roll of packing tape sat on the floor beside printed pages from a moving company. Harper had begun preparing the cabin for sale before the title company stopped her. Thomas called Rachel. "Photograph everything," she said. "Do not move the boxes unless necessary to prevent damage. There's more." In the small office at the rear of the cabin, Thomas had found a black document case beneath the desk. It was rectangular, hard-sided, and secured with 2 combination locks. Silver letters near the handle read, "Do not open it," Rachel said. "I wasn't going to. Leave the cabin and contact Agent Pike." Thomas looked at the case. "How did it get here?" "We do not guess." He photographed the case from 4 angles. Then he stepped outside and waited in his truck. Agent Aaron Pike arrived 80 minutes later with another federal investigator and a Jefferson County deputy. Thomas signed a statement identifying the property and explaining when he had entered. "Did you touch the case?" Pike asked. "No. Did you know it was here, No? Could Cameron have had access to the cabin? Harper had a key?" Pike did not ask what that implied. The investigators entered with a warrant obtained through an on-call federal magistrate. Thomas remained outside. Snow began falling lightly across the hood of his truck. After nearly 2 hours, Pike returned carrying the case inside a sealed evidence bag. "What was in it?" Thomas asked. Pike stopped beside the driver's door. "Records relevant to the investigation." "That tells me nothing. It tells you what I can tell you." Thomas looked toward the cabin. Were Altura documents inside? Pike's pause gave the answer before his words did. "Copies of internal materials were recovered. How much? Enough that you should not enter the office again until we finish processing it." The investigator searched the cabin until after dark. Thomas waited at Elena's bakery. At 8:36, Marcus called. His voice was quieter than usual. The case contained investor ledgers, shell company records, copied Altura schedules, and a list of planned securities transactions. Thomas closed his eyes. "Was Harper's name on anything? I cannot answer that." "What about Cameron, Thomas?" He stopped. Marcus continued. "There were documents inside that should never have left Altura. The evidence appears to connect the access attempt, Blake Summit's fundraising claims, and the planned trades." Thomas looked through the bakery window at the empty parking lot. "So the case matters." "Yes." "How much?" Marcus paused. "It may be the strongest physical evidence federal investigators have recovered." Thomas lowered the phone. The cabin had once been the safest place he knew. His father had repaired its porch with his own hands. Thomas had spent his wedding anniversary there. Harper had stored Cameron's secrets beneath the desk in the back room. The betrayal had entered every place Thomas trusted. But this time it had left something behind. Not another lie. A case full of records. And records, unlike people, did not change their story when the questions became difficult. The first settlement conference took place 23 days after federal agents removed Cameron's document case from the Evergreen cabin. By then, the marriage had become a set of columns: assets, debts, transfers, separate property claims. Marital property claims, possible reimbursement, possible dissipation. Thomas sat beside Rachel Bennett at one end of a long conference table. Harper sat across from him with Samuel Whitmore and a second attorney who specialized in financial disputes. Between them stood 3 binders. The first contained banking records. The second contained property documents. The third contained exhibits from Harper's deposition. A retired judge named Helen Ward served as mediator. She was 70, with silver hair cut above her shoulders and a voice that never needed to rise. She entered at 9:00, placed a legal pad in front of her, and looked at both parties. "This is not a trial," she said. "No one is receiving moral vindication today. We are here to determine whether this marriage can be dissolved without spending another year paying professionals to argue over numbers that already exist. Harper looked down at the table. Thomas kept his hands beside his folder. Judge Ward began with the house. The residence had been appraised at $742,000. After the mortgage and home equity balance, the estimated marital value was slightly more than $286,000. Harper wanted to remain in the house. Thomas did not. Her proposal required Thomas to transfer his interest, while Harper refinanced the mortgage within 6 months. Rachel turned one page. Her current income does not support refinancing, Samuel answered quickly. Miss Rodriguez's suspension is temporary. Hawthorne and Vale has terminated her, Rachel said. Thomas looked toward Harper. He had not known. Harper's face remained still, but her fingers tightened around a pen. Samuel objected to the characterization. She has not exhausted her appeal rights. Judge Ward looked at him over her glasses. Is she currently employed by the brokerage number? Then Miss Bennett's statement is accurate. The room became quiet. Harper wanted 12 months to refinance. Rachel offered 90 days. Samuel requested 9 months. Judge Ward wrote a note. Put the house aside. We will return to it. They moved to the hidden credit cards. Harper argued that some charges had supported her real estate work and therefore benefited the household. Clothing, dining, hotels, and travel were part of maintaining relationships with luxury clients. Rachel displayed a transaction chart. Of the $68,400 balance, more than $31,000 had been spent at hotels, restaurants, and retailers on dates matching Harper's communications with Cameron. Another $18,500 had gone directly to Blake Summit entities. The remaining charges included ordinary purchases mixed with unexplained cash advances. Our position is that these debts were concealed and did not serve the marriage, Rachel said. Thomas should not be assigned half. Samuel leaned back. Colorado is a no-fault state. We are not trying an affair. No, Rachel said. We are tracing money. Judge Ward looked at Harper. Did your husband know these accounts existed? Harper glanced at Samuel before answering. No. Did he authorize the Blake Summit payments? No. Were the hotel stays disclosed? No. Judge Ward turned toward Samuel. That is not a promising allocation argument. The home equity transfer came next. Samuel described the $25,000 as a failed marital investment. Rachel described it as unauthorized dissipation, disguised as a renovation deposit. Judge Ward examined the transfer record. Why was the payment labeled kitchen renovation? Harper's voice was low. Cameron said the investment needed a neutral description. Thomas looked at her. It was the clearest answer she had given. Samuel shifted in his chair. Miss Rodriguez was manipulated by an experienced financial professional. Rachel did not react. She was a licensed real estate professional who regularly handled 6- and 7-figure transactions. She knew descriptions on financial records mattered. Harper's eyes moved toward Thomas. I thought the money would come back. Thomas did not answer. Judge Ward turned to him. Mr. Rodriguez, do you believe your wife intended to lose the money? No? Do you believe she intended to conceal it? Yes. What is the difference in your mind? Thomas looked at the transfer record. She expected success to erase the method. Harper's face tightened. Judge Ward wrote the sentence down. The discussion shifted to the cabin. Thomas wanted to retain it. Harper wanted half its equity. Rachel argued that although the cabin had been refinanced during the marriage, Thomas's original interest came from money inherited after his father's death. Her tracing expert calculated a separate property component, with the remaining appreciation treated as marital. Samuel challenged the calculation. Judge Ward reviewed the appraisal loan history and inheritance records. Then she reached the photographs Thomas had taken before agents searched the property. Boxes packed near the entrance, moving company documents, empty walls, the black case beneath the office desk. "Why were you preparing this property for removal?" she asked Harper. "I believed we would need to sell it. There was already a restraint against transfer. I didn't understand that packing violated anything. It may not have," Judge Ward said, "but attempting to obtain closing documents without your husband's signature is another matter." Harper looked toward Samuel. He said nothing. By noon, the mediator separated the parties into different rooms. Thomas sat with Rachel near a window overlooking Cherry Creek. Traffic moved below in narrow lines. Rachel opened a container of salad. Thomas drank coffee. "You need to eat," she said. "Elena says the same thing. She is correct." Thomas took half a sandwich from the lunch tray. Rachel reviewed the likely outcomes. The house would probably be sold unless Harper secured immediate financing. The hidden credit cards would likely be assigned mostly, perhaps entirely, to Harper. The $25,000 transfer could be charged against her share of marital assets. Thomas had a strong claim to retain the cabin, but he might need to offset part of its marital appreciation. "What about legal fees?" he asked. "We request contribution based on concealment and unnecessary litigation. Courts do not always grant everything. And Cameron's case separate. Even though the evidence overlaps, separate systems. Do not confuse them." At 1:15, Judge Ward entered the room alone. "Harper has made a revised proposal," she said. Thomas placed the sandwich down. Judge Ward read from her notes. Harper would surrender any claim to the cabin. She would accept responsibility for both private credit cards and the $25,000 home equity transfer. The house would be listed for sale within 30 days. Net proceeds would be divided, but Thomas would receive an additional credit for the transferred funds and certain attorney fees. In exchange, Harper wanted Thomas to agree that neither party would make public statements about the marriage or distribute deposition materials. Thomas looked at Rachel. "A standard mutual confidentiality provision is possible," Rachel said, "but it cannot interfere with subpoenas, regulatory inquiries, or federal cooperation." Judge Ward nodded. "Her proposal includes those exceptions." Thomas looked toward the closed door separating the conference rooms. "What does she want that isn't written there?" Judge Ward did not answer immediately. "She wants confirmation that you did not initiate the federal investigation to punish her for the affair." Thomas felt his shoulders stiffen. "That isn't a property term." "No." "Then why is it here?" "Because settlement is often about the question people believe money cannot answer." Thomas stood and walked toward the window. He could say no. He could force Harper to defend every transfer before a judge. He could require testimony about the hotel, the badge, the messages, and the attempted cabin sale. A public record might correct the story she had told their friends. It might also extend the case for months. Thomas turned. "I reported the badge before she asked for the hotel night." Judge Ward nodded. "The timeline supports that. I reported it because someone photographed my credential and tried to enter Altura. Yes. I didn't know she would ask for one night when I made the report. No one has produced evidence that you did." Thomas looked at Rachel. "What do you recommend the financial terms are favorable?" Rachel said. "More favorable than many trial outcomes. The confidentiality language protects you too." Thomas understood the practical answer. Still, one concern remained. Does Harper keep the jewelry purchased on the hidden cards? Rachel checked the inventory. Approximately $32,000 in appraised value. Then it should be sold and applied to those balances. Judge Ward wrote it down. "Anything else?" "The social media post comes down." Rachel added, "And no future claims of financial abandonment that contradict the account records." Judge Ward left. 40 minutes later, Samuel entered with Harper. Her attorneys had advised against direct discussion, but the mediator allowed both parties to remain for the final terms. Harper sat across from Thomas. She looked smaller than she had at the deposition. Not physically. The polished certainty around her had narrowed. Judge Ward read each provision aloud. Sale of the house, allocation of debt, cabin to Thomas, jewelry liquidation, mutual confidentiality, preservation of all evidence. No interference with government or regulatory investigations. When she finished, Harper looked at Thomas. "Cameron said you would never leave," she said. Samuel touched her arm. "Harper," but she continued. "He said you would forgive anything because you were afraid to start over." Thomas looked at the unsigned settlement pages. For months he had wondered whether Cameron had taken advantage of a weakness Harper already felt, or whether Harper had helped invent the weakness because it made her choices easier. The distinction no longer mattered. "I was afraid," Thomas said. Harper's eyes lifted. "I'm still leaving." No one spoke. Judge Ward slid the agreement toward them. Harper signed first. Her hand shook once near the final page. Thomas waited until she placed the pen down. Then he signed beneath his printed name. The settlement was not yet a divorce decree. The court still had to review the terms. Federal investigators still held the case from the cabin. Cameron's criminal exposure remained unresolved. But at 3:52 that afternoon, the financial war inside Thomas's marriage ended. Outside the building, Harper stopped beside the sidewalk. Thomas walked past her. "Was one night really worth all this?" she asked. He paused. The answer she wanted concerned the hotel. The real answer began months earlier, with a false transfer description, a photographed badge, and the belief that Thomas's loyalty had made him powerless. He looked at her one final time. It was never one night. Then he continued toward his truck without turning back. The final divorce hearing was scheduled for 8:30 on a Wednesday morning. Thomas arrived at the Denver District Court 40 minutes early. He had spent the previous night reading the settlement agreement again. Rachel Bennett expected no surprises, but Thomas no longer signed anything without checking every page twice. The courthouse hallway smelled of floor wax, old paper, and coffee. Attorneys moved between courtrooms carrying files. Couples sat apart on wooden benches staring at their phones or at nothing. Rachel arrived at 8:04 with a thin black folder. "You're early," she said. "So are you. I'm paid to be." Thomas almost smiled. Rachel reviewed the procedure. The judge would confirm that both parties had signed voluntarily examine the financial terms and decide whether the agreement should become part of the final decree. "There may be questions about the unequal debt allocation," Rachel said. "Answer only what is asked. What about the federal investigation? It remains separate unless the judge asks whether it affects the settlement." Separate had defined the past months. The marriage could end without determining whether Harper had committed a crime. Cameron could face federal charges without affecting who received the cabin. Harper's licensing inquiry could continue without deciding what kind of wife she had been. Thomas had once wanted one complete answer. The law provided narrower ones. At 8:17, Harper entered with Samuel Whitmore. She wore a dark green dress beneath a black coat. The diamond necklace she usually wore was gone. The jewelry had been sent to an auction company 2 weeks earlier. Harper sat on the opposite bench and did not greet him. At 8:33, the clerk opened the courtroom. Judge Miriam Calder sat beneath the Colorado State seal. She appeared to be in her late 50s with gray-streaked dark hair and reading glasses resting low on her nose. The clerk called their names. Thomas and Harper moved to separate tables. Judge Calder reviewed the file, then looked at Thomas. "Mr. Rodriguez, did you sign the separation agreement voluntarily?" "Yes, Your Honor. Were you represented by counsel?" "Yes. Did anyone threaten or improperly pressure you to sign no? Do you understand that most property provisions cannot later be changed simply because you regret them?" "Yes." She asked Harper the same questions. Harper answered quietly. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Calder turned several pages. The agreement assigns approximately $68,000 in credit card debt to Miss Rodriguez, along with responsibility for a $25,000 home equity transfer. That is a significant, unequal allocation. Samuel stood. The allocation was negotiated with the assistance of a retired judicial mediator. Miss Rodriguez accepts responsibility because the accounts were maintained in her name and involved disputed investment activity. Judge Calder looked at Harper. Do you understand that you are accepting these obligations, even though some debts were incurred during the marriage? Yes. Do you believe settlement is preferable to continued litigation? Harper's fingers pressed against the edge of the table. Yes. The judge turned to Rachel. And Mr. Rodriguez receives the evergreen property subject to the agreed equalization calculation. That is correct, Rachel said. The agreement recognizes his traced separate property contribution and credits him for marital funds dissipated through the Blake Summit transfer. Judge Calder continued reviewing the terms. The marital home would be listed for sale. Retirement accounts would be divided. Neither party would receive spousal maintenance. The jewelry proceeds would be applied to Harper's private card balances. Thomas would receive partial reimbursement for attorney fees because undisclosed accounts and incomplete financial disclosures had increased the cost of the case. Judge Calder stopped at the confidentiality provision. This clause cannot prevent either party from responding truthfully to law enforcement courts, regulators, licensing authorities, or subpoenas. We agree, Rachel said. Samuel nodded. We agree as well. Judge Calder looked at both parties. Confidentiality is not concealment from lawful authority. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor, Thomas said. Harper gave the same answer. The judge opened another folder. I have also reviewed portions of the deposition. Thomas felt the courtroom narrow. Judge Calder did not mention the affair. She did not mention the hotel. She mentioned records. The October calls Harper had first placed in January. The private cards, she said Thomas should have known about, though she had never disclosed them. The home equity transfer labeled as a kitchen renovation when no renovation existed. The attempt to prepare the cabin for sale. The court does not determine marital fault. Judge Calder said, however, credibility and financial disclosure are relevant when evaluating whether an agreement is informed and fair. Harper lowered her eyes. The documentary evidence does not support the claim that Mr. Rodriguez abandoned the household financially. Records show continued payments toward the mortgage utilities insurance and property taxes. Existing joint funds were not removed. Thomas remained still. The statement was not dramatic, but it corrected the story Harper had told friends and posted online. Not in public opinion, in the legal record. Judge Calder looked toward Harper. Miss Rodriguez, do you withdraw any claim that Mr. Rodriguez improperly diverted marital funds? Harper lifted her head. Yes. And you acknowledge that the private card accounts were not disclosed to him before separation? Yes. And that the $25,000 transfer was made without his knowledge. A longer pause followed. Yes. The court reporter recorded the word. Thomas felt no victory. He had imagined that hearing Harper admit it might release something inside him. Instead, it felt like a door closing quietly. Judge Calder reviewed the final decree. The court finds the marriage irretrievably broken. Thomas had read the phrase many times. Hearing it aloud was different, not confused, not temporarily damaged, broken beyond legal repair. Judge Calder signed in blue ink. The separation agreement is approved and incorporated. The marriage is dissolved effective today. The clerk stamped the document. That was all. 11 years ended without raised voices music or anyone asking Thomas whether he was certain. Outside the courtroom, Rachel handed him a certified copy. You're divorced, she said. Yes. There are still implementation steps. The house sale, retirement division, cabin title work. I know. But the marriage itself is finished. Thomas placed the decree inside his folder. Harper and Samuel emerged several minutes later. Samuel spoke with Rachel about the property broker, then walked toward the elevators. Harper remained near a courthouse window. Thomas started to leave. "Thomas," she said. He stopped. The judge made it sound like I planned everything. The judge read the records. I was lied to. By Cameron. Yes. Thomas nodded. So was I. Her face tightened. I didn't know about Derek. I didn't know anyone would try to enter Altura, but you knew you photographed the badge. Harper looked away. I thought Cameron needed proof that I had access. The admission remained between them. Proof of access. Not a joke. Not a presentation. "Why tell me now?" Thomas asked. "Because I need you to believe I didn't know how far it would go." Thomas thought of the copied badge, the delivery code, the executive schedules, and the black case hidden beneath his father's desk. "I believe you didn't expect the consequences," he said. "That isn't the same thing." "No." Harper held her decree against her coat. "What happens to me now? That isn't mine to decide." Thomas walked away. Cold morning air moved across the courthouse steps. Melted snow ran in thin streams along the curb. He opened the decree once more. It did not say he had won. It did not call Harper cruel. It did not mention the ring beside the wine glass or the red overnight bag. It said the marriage was dissolved. The property would be divided according to evidence. The debts would remain with the person who had concealed and incurred them. The cabin would stay with Thomas. For months, Harper had believed his calm meant he would accept whatever story she gave him. The judge had seen something else. A preserved record, a documented timeline, a man who had left without destroying anything except the assumption that he never would. Thomas closed the folder and walked toward his truck. Before he reached it, his phone rang. Marcus Reed's name appeared on the screen. Thomas answered. "Marcus, I know you're at court," Marcus said. "I'll keep this brief." "What happened?" "Federal agents arrested Cameron Blake this morning." Thomas stopped beside the curb. "Derek Holloway entered a cooperation agreement." Marcus continued. "The charges will be unsealed this afternoon." Thomas looked back at the courthouse doors. One judgment had just ended his marriage. Another system was beginning its own account. Cameron Blake's federal charges were unsealed at 2:00 that afternoon. Thomas read the summary in Rachel Bennett's office. Securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to obtain confidential business information, aggravated identity theft connected to the cloned Altura credential. Cameron was also accused of using shell companies to attract investors, conceal fund movements, and prepare securities purchases tied to Altura's confidential acquisition. Derek Holloway had agreed to cooperate. According to the filed documents, Derek admitted using Thomas's cloned badge during the failed entry at Altura. He also admitted that Cameron had directed him to obtain internal schedules and confirm the location of temporary acquisition records. The badge had failed before Derek reached the restricted floor. The plan had failed. The conspiracy had not disappeared merely because it failed. Thomas closed the charging summary. "What happens to Harper?" he asked. Rachel sat behind her desk. "That depends on federal investigators and prosecutors. Her divorce is complete. Her criminal exposure is a separate question. Will they charge her? I don't know." Thomas looked at the pages again. For months he had imagined Cameron as the man who had entered his marriage and taken something. The records showed something more complicated. Cameron had not entered alone. Harper had opened doors. She had transferred money, supplied photographs, answered questions, and hidden information because she believed the future Cameron promised would excuse the methods used to reach it. Thomas placed the summary on Rachel's desk. "I don't want updates unless I'm required to participate." Rachel studied him. "That is reasonable. I'm done making him part of every day." 3 weeks later, the marital house sold. Thomas attended the closing remotely. Harper signed from her attorney's office. The transaction paid off the mortgage and home equity balance. After adjustments, attorney fee credits, and repayment of the unauthorized transfer, Thomas received his portion of the remaining proceeds. There was no final argument. No exchange of keys in a driveway. The closing company sent a confirmation email at 4:16 p.m. Thomas noticed the time. His father's stopped watch still showed 4:16. He took it from the drawer beside his bed and turned it over in his hand. The cracked leather strap had not changed. The small scratches across the metal back remained exactly where they had been. Thomas brought the watch to a repair shop the next morning. The owner, an elderly man wearing a magnifying lens over one eye, opened the case and examined the mechanism. "It can run again," he said. Thomas had not expected the sentence to affect him. "How much?" "Not much. The movement needs cleaning. New mainspring. The strap should be replaced." "Keep the strap." The man looked at its cracked surface. "It may not last." "That's fine." 2 weeks later, Thomas returned to Evergreen. Federal investigators had released the cabin after completing their search. The black document case was gone. Evidence markers had been removed. The office carpet still showed a pale rectangle where the case had rested beneath the desk. Thomas opened every window. Cold mountain air moved through the rooms. He unpacked the photographs Harper had removed from the walls. He rehung the picture of his father standing beside the porch during its first repair. He returned the dishes to the cabinets and carried the empty moving boxes outside. At noon, Elena arrived with sandwiches, cleaning supplies, and a toolbox. "You could have asked me to come earlier," she said. "I just did. You asked after you had already cleaned half the place." Thomas carried a box toward the truck. "You complain when I don't ask. I also complain when you ask badly." They worked until sunset. Elena washed the kitchen shelves. Thomas repaired a loose stairboard near the porch. When the hammer slipped and struck his thumb, he cursed loudly enough to startle a bird from the roof. Elena looked through the doorway. That sounded almost emotional. Thomas held up his injured hand. "Go back inside." She laughed. The sound carried across the snow. That night they ate beside the fireplace. For the first time in months, Thomas finished everything on his plate. Altura completed its acquisition later that spring. The company announced the transaction publicly after regulatory approval. Thomas learned the target's name at the same time as most employees outside the executive group. Cameron had built an investment story around information he never fully possessed. He had sold certainty where only fragments existed. Marcus called Thomas into his office after the announcement. The yellow-striped temporary badge lay on the table between them. "You won't need this anymore," Marcus said. Thomas removed it from his jacket. Marcus handed him a new permanent credential. The photograph was current. Thomas looked more tired than he remembered, but his eyes were clear. "Corporate legal closed its internal review of your conduct," Marcus said. "You followed reporting procedures. You preserved evidence. You did not interfere. That sounds like I managed not to make things worse." Marcus leaned back. "You did more than that." Thomas attached the new badge to his jacket. "What happens to the old security system?" "Already replaced. New authentication. No visual duplication vulnerabilities." Thomas nodded. Marcus watched him for a moment. "There is an opening in enterprise risk operations." Thomas looked up. "I'm a facilities manager. You were a risk analyst for 9 years. That was a long time ago." "Apparently not." The position involved coordinating physical security vendor access, internal fraud response, and operational risk across Altura's regional sites. It was not a return to the life Thomas had left after his father died. It was something built from both versions of him. He accepted the role 1 month later. Harper's real estate license was suspended after the state inquiry found disclosure and documentation violations. She was not charged in Cameron's initial federal case, but prosecutors identified her as a cooperating witness. Thomas learned that only because he received a subpoena. He testified before a federal grand jury for 93 minutes. He described the badge photographs Harper's questions Cameron's call, and the evidence recovered from the cabin. He did not speculate about anyone's motives. When he left the courthouse, Harper stood across the plaza beside Samuel Whitmore. She saw him. Neither approached the other. Thomas continued walking. Cameron later pleaded guilty to conspiracy and wire fraud. Derek received a reduced sentence recommendation in exchange for his cooperation. Investors pursued the remaining Blake Summit assets through bankruptcy court. The $25,000 Harper had transferred was never recovered from Cameron. It had already been accounted for in the divorce. That was enough. Nearly 1 year after the night at the Crawford Hotel, Thomas drove to the cabin alone. The repaired watch rested on his wrist, still held by his father's original cracked strap. He made coffee before sunrise and carried it onto the porch. Snow covered the pines. The sky above the mountains changed slowly from black to deep blue, then pale gold. His phone remained inside. No account alerts, no legal messages, no photographs to preserve, no questions requiring careful answers. For a long time, Thomas had believed freedom would arrive as a final ruling, an arrest, or an admission. It had not. Freedom arrived quietly. It was waking without checking whether someone had lied during the night. It was entering a room without searching for what had been moved. It was trusting silence because nothing dangerous hid inside it. Harper had asked for one night with Cameron. She had expected Thomas to give her permission and remain available when she returned. Instead, he had given her what she had claimed to want. A life without his boundaries, without his questions, without his loyalty protecting the consequences of her choices. Thomas had given himself the same thing. He looked at his father's watch. The second hand moved steadily across the face. Time had not reversed. Nothing lost had returned in its original form. The marriage was over. The house belonged to strangers. The man Thomas had been before Harper's betrayal no longer existed. But the clock was moving. So was he. Thomas lifted the coffee and watched sunlight reach the porch his father had built. He was alone. For the first time, the word did not sound like punishment. It sounded like peace. Sometimes the deepest betrayal is not the moment someone chooses another person. It is the moment they begin using your love as proof that you will tolerate anything. Thomas's story reminds us that patience is not weakness, silence is not surrender, and love should never require us to abandon our dignity. He did not heal by shouting louder, exposing everyone publicly, or chasing revenge. He healed by facing the truth, protecting what remained, and refusing to let another person's choices define his future. Life will sometimes break the plans we were certain would last forever. A home can be sold, a marriage can end, trust can disappear, but losing what was familiar does not mean losing yourself. There are moments when walking away is not failure. It is the first honest step toward peace. Real freedom begins when we stop waiting for people to become who they promised to be and start choosing the life our heart truly deserves. Thomas could not reverse time, but he could move forward with clarity. And so can you. The pain may change you, but it does not have to destroy you. One day, the silence that once felt lonely may finally feel safe. What lesson touched you most in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this can help people feel stronger, wiser, and less alone, please subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about betrayal, courage, justice, and healing.